Chapter 58. The bloodline of the Lionian family is really regressing. Do you really think that a mere mortal who has just become a sword wielder can defeat me, Yixian? Yixian brandished her sword. Human, I don't want to hurt you. This is a grudge between me and the Lionian family. Get out of my way. Since I, Guhan, am standing here, I won't leave. Cut the crap and make your move. Ji Yuhan's tone was firm as he said this. Then, he displayed the starting stance of the first move of the 5 fleeting time styles. Obviously, he had decided to fight to the end with Yixian. Lionian Ling was touched by Guhan's words. She felt that she had not misjudged Guhan. With his stubbornness, he would definitely become an outstanding sword wielder in the future. This little fellow has made a huge profit. Liu Lei, who was watching from the side, took out an opium pipe from his pocket and lit it up with trembling hands. If I were 70 years younger, I wouldn't have given such a good opportunity to you. Regardless of Liu Lei's thoughts, Yixian was angered by Guhan's attitude. Facing a newbie like Guhan, she immediately used a killing move. She aimed at Guhan's armpit. If this move connected, he might still be alive, but his arm would basically be crippled. Her target is your armpit. Use the third stance, sorrow of parting. Lionian Ling, who was lying on the ground, gave the order that she thought was the most correct. I think it's better to use the 5th stance. Although the 3rd stance can indeed block Yixian's attack, if I use the 5th stance, I can still attack Yixian's wrist. Guhan did not think much of it. This Lionian Ling was also a half-baked person. She had not even fully grasped the 5 forms of fleeting time, and yet she still had the cheek to order me around. Although he was disdainful, Guhan still chose to listen to Lionian Ling's instructions. The first move was sorrow of parting. In order to show that he had really just learned this move, Guhan even deliberately used the move in a stiff and inflexible manner. But even so, it was just enough to block the Yixian sword's first attack. This brat's moves are all over the place, but is actually able to utilize the sorrow of separation. Fleeting Time's Cold, who had witnessed Ji Yuhan's first use of a sword technique, was shocked. Although he had successfully learned the secret voice transmission technique, Lionian Ling had already confirmed that Guhan had outstanding martial arts talent and a certain level of martial arts foundation when they fought over the Yixian sword. That was why she had taken a gamble and taught the 5 forms of fleeting time to Guhan. However, in Lionian Ling's heart, she did not expect more than 30% of Guhan to be able to successfully learn the 5 forms of fleeting time. After all, he only had a minute to learn it, which was the best of the best. Isn't this guy's talent a little too terrifying? Lionian Ling thought to herself. Of course, this guy's talent is not as good as mine, but at least he is much better than those brats from the subsidiary sects. Go to hell. Yixian's sword was blocked by Ji Yuhan, a newcomer who didn't seem to know anything. The anger in Yixian's heart exploded. The slender Yixian sword in his hand instantly turned into a vicious viper as it continuously launched fierce attacks at Ji Yuhan. I can't cut it. It's the sorrow of separation. In the heart. I can't cut it. It's messy. Another feeling, I can't cut it. It's the sorrow of separation. It's the sorrow of separation. It's the sorrow of separation. In the heart. This was the name of the 5 sword techniques of the 5 forms of fleeting time, which were passed down by Lionian Ling's ancestors. In the face of Yixian's tide-like attacks, Lionian Ling could only respond with a series of moves. However, she was extremely worried because she knew that a newbie like Guhan, who had just learned the 5 forms of fleeting time, would definitely not be able to keep up with the speed of her moves. Lionian Ling secretly put her hand into her dimensional pocket and held onto her life-saving item. If she discovered that Guhan's life was in danger, she would immediately use the item. Even if she had to destroy the entire sword burial ground, she had to protect this man who was standing in front of her. To Lionian Ling's surprise, Guhan was actually able to keep up with the speed of her moves. In the beginning, the connection of the moves was a little difficult and stiff, but after a dozen moves, it was no longer possible to tell that Guhan was a newbie who had just come into contact with sword techniques. The connection of the moves was so smooth that it could not be cut off. Moreover, after Guhan used this move, it was more accurate and precise than before. The stiffness, loopholes, and weaknesses had all disappeared after a few times. Gu Han was like a veteran who had practiced the 5 forms of fleeting time for several years. Every move was gradually perfected. This Gu Han. Is he still human? Liuyan Ling was so shocked that she could not close her mouth. When she first practiced the 5 forms of fleeting time, it took her a total of 3 hours to reach this level. But this Gu Han? From the moment he received the 5 forms of fleeting time until now, it had not even been 3 minutes, and he had already surpassed a day's worth of effort. Could it be that this person's talent in swordsmanship is even higher than mine? This thought suddenly appeared in Liuyan Ling's mind. In her world, in her family, if she needed to spend 3 days to learn something, no one could learn it in 10 days. Even her father admitted that he was not as talented as Liuyan Ling when he was young. He admitted that Liuyan Ling was one of the top 10 geniuses in the history of the fleeting time family. As time went by, Liuyan Ling really thought that she was the #1 genius in the world. But she never expected that the person she had randomly found to cheat for her would have a talent that surpassed her in swordsmanship. This caused Liuyan Ling's worldview to collapse, and she felt terrible. There's no need to belittle yourself, Miss Ling. Liu Lei stood beside fleeting time Ling and comforted him. My 100 years of experience have taught me that a person's potential can be unleashed at a moment of life and death. It can even be 100 times stronger than usual. If Miss Ling was in a life-and-death situation, you wouldn't be any worse than this kid. What Liu Lei meant was that Gu Han had only learned so quickly because he was in a life-and-death situation. In fact, his talent was not that high, at least not higher than Liuyan Ling's. Really? Hearing Liu Lei's words, Liuyan Ling suddenly felt much better. Absolutely. Liu Lei nodded. However, this kid's talent is indeed terrifyingly strong. TSK, I really don't know why the teachers in those schools let go of such a diamond in the rough. Miss Lin, you might not know, but our Yuzhong Academy has always been at the bottom of the Swordsman's Cup for the past few years. Looks like we won't have to worry about the ancient sword group this year. Old man Liu Lei sniggered. What? What do you mean your Yuzhong University won't have to worry? Ling spat on the ground. My Liuyan clan has taken a liking to this person. He'll be a member of our Liuyan clan in the future. What has it got to do with your Yuzhong University? Sigh. You can't say that. He's a child born and raised in our Yuzhong city. Naturally, he belongs to our Yuzhong University. Why should he join your Liuyan clan? Liu Lei blew at his white beard in dissatisfaction. I, Liuyan Ling, am the future family head of the Liuyan clan. If I say he belongs to our Liuyan clan, then he belongs to our Liuyan clan, Ling retorted without backing down. Haha, that's not right. Miss Ling, you're not the family head yet. How can you decide the matters of the clan so domineeringly? Moreover, this Gu Han doesn't have the bloodline of the Liuyan clan. He can't possibly join your Liuyan clan. So what if he doesn't have the bloodline of our Liuyan clan? Ling grew anxious. What? What will I do to him? Liu Lei narrowed his eyes as he stared at fleeting time Ling with a mischievous expression. Are you trying to recruit him into your fleeting time clan to be your son-in-law? Who's going to recruit him? Ling blurted out in a panic. That's right, I'll take him in as my disciple, a personal disciple. That should be fine, right? Disciple. Liu Lei was stunned for a moment before bursting into laughter. That's right. Personal disciples can indeed join the Liuyan clan. How could I, Liu Lei, have forgotten about this? Miss Ling, you've really thought this through. For some reason, the words thought through sounded especially piercing to Liuyan Ling's ears. Wait, did I forget something? Liuyan Ling, who had been speaking with Liu Lei for a long time, suddenly felt that she had missed something. She couldn't figure it out no matter how hard she thought about it. She only slapped her thigh when she heard a miserable groan. Oh no, I forgot to instruct Gu Han on which moves to use. That groan just now couldn't have been that idiot Gu Han's, could it? Idiot Gu Han, please don't hold a grudge against me. It's all because of that old coffin Liu Lei that I was distracted. Please don't die. Liuyan Ling hurriedly raised her head to look at the battlefield. Aya, what's going on? Why is Guhan sitting on my sword mistress's stomach? What kind of weird position is this? Can someone explain it to me? Chapter 59. Please be quiet, Lady Yixian. Guhan used a very ambiguous posture and rode on Yixian's belly. His left knee pressed on Yixian's plump and soft chest. Don't get me wrong, Guhan didn't have any bad intentions. However, Guhan didn't intend to break Yixian's protective shield and then use direct damage to make Yixian lose her ability to fight. Only by using this method of complete suppression could he control Yixian so that she couldn't launch any more attacks. Miss Ling, come here quickly, I can't suppress her anymore. Guhan shouted loudly. He had exhausted all the strength in his body to suppress Yixian, who was constantly struggling and twisting. If it wasn't for Qing Pin's sword in his hand and his own physical fitness, Guhan definitely wouldn't be able to suppress Yixian. Oh. Liuyan Ling dragged the wounds on her body and half crawled and half walked to Guhan's side. As soon as she saw the target of her resentment, Yixian struggled even more and almost pushed Guhan off her body. How could this be? Without my command, how did you? Liuyan Ling asked incredulously, but before she could finish her question, she was directly interrupted by Guhan. There's no time to explain, Miss Ling, quickly return Yixian to the sword, I really can't suppress it anymore. Guhan's forehead was sweating, and it seemed that the situation was really bad. Okay. Liuyan Ling took a deep look at Guhan, and under the gaze of Yixian's resentful eyes, she put her hand on Yixian's left chest and squeezed hard. Don't misunderstand, Liuyan Ling isn't some lily. It's just that Yixian's sword hilt is on her left chest. If you want her to return to her sword, Liuyan Ling must pinch Yixian's left chest. After such a torment, Yixian's body forcibly turned into specks of starlight under her unwilling expression. Finally, it gathered into the shape of the Yixian sword and appeared in Liuyan Ling's hand. This inexplicable battle of murdering her master was also temporarily drawn to an end. Aya, am I late? Right after the graceful immortal returned to the sword burial grounds, a lady with a mature temperament and a beautiful face with a hoj on her head, dressed in a long white dress, entered the sword burial grounds. The reason why she was called a lady was because she was carrying a basket of fresh vegetables, pork, live fish and other ingredients in her hands. It seemed like she had just returned from the market. Yo, Zhonlong, you're finally back. The immortal sword rank sword wielder Liu Lei walked up to her with a fawning expression. Why did you buy so many ingredients? Didn't I tell you not to worry about these things? Saving lives is more important. It's all right, Lei. Madame Zhonlong was still full of smiles as she handed the basket full of ingredients to Liu Lei. I know that you like stewed beef with potatoes the most, so I bought some more. Are you happy? I'm so happy. I'm so touched. Liu Lei was so happy that he was about to cry. Lei, where's Yixian? Hurry up and teach her a lesson. She's in a hurry to boil water and stew meat. Madame Zhonlong scanned the surroundings. Strange, why can't I see Yixian? It's all right, Yixian has already been taken care of by this little brother. Liu Lei dragged the confused Zhonlong to the side of Guhan and Liuyan Ling. He pointed at Liuyan Ling and introduced, let me introduce you. This is the eldest daughter of the Liuyan family, the future head of the Liuyan family, Miss Liuyan Ling. Liu Lei then pointed at Guhan. This is the newcomer sword wielder Guhan. He was the one who defeated Yixian just now. After introducing Guhan and Liuyan Ling, Liu Lei finally introduced Zhonlong. She is my sword lady, a spiritual sword lady, dragon-slaying sword. She's the one who I said would arrive in 8 minutes. Look, she's here in a little more than 7 minutes. Haha. Greetings, dragon-slaying sword lady. Greetings, dragon-slaying sword lady. Guhan and Liuyan Ling bowed to Zhonlong at the same time. Unexpectedly, this sword lady who looked like a full-time wife was actually the famous spiritual sword lady, Zhonlong. This was the first time Guhan had seen a spiritual sword lady. The dragon-slaying sword's origin was uncertain, but according to legend, it was the sword of a generation of Heavenly Master Shu Zun, Heavenly Master Shu in the Middle Ages when he was cultivating in the mortal world. Before Heavenly Master Shu reached the Tao, he once killed a flood dragon that was about to become a real dragon on Mount Mailing in Yuzhang City. using this dragon-slaying sword. From the legend, the dragon-slaying sword had already broken away from the scope of a mortal sword and reached the level of a spiritual sword. In fact, the dragon-slaying sword was indeed a spiritual sword lady, possessing unimaginable power. It was just that he never thought that such a powerful sword lady would have the same temperament as the neighbor next door, Mrs. Wang. Of course, in terms of beauty, Mrs. Wang could not compare to Mrs. John Long. It's good that you're fine. It's good that you're fine. Mrs. John Long smiled and patted Liuyan Ling's head. Ling has already grown so big. As expected, a girl changes 18 times between childhood and womanhood. At that time, I told Sister Kai Xiao that she was a real beauty. After not seeing her for 5 years, Ling has even found a boyfriend. She's really lucky. Kai Xiao was Liuyan Ling's father, who was also the current master of the Liuyan family, the Sword Lady. No. Lady Zhonlong, this person is not my boyfriend. Liuyan Ling waved her hand and explained, he is not Ling's boyfriend. He is Ling's personal disciple. Personal disciple? A few drops of cold sweat appeared on Guhan's forehead. Miss Ling, let's be clear. When did I, Guhan, become your personal disciple? When? When you learned our Liuyan family's secret 5 techniques of fleeting time, you became my personal disciple. Liuyan Ling placed her hands on her hips and shouted, what? You've taken advantage of me, Liuyan Ling, and you still want to deny it? You clearly gave it to me on your own accord. I didn't ask you for it. Guhan also said tit for tat. Besides, if I didn't learn that sword technique, wouldn't you have been chopped into meat paste by Yixian long ago? H, let me tell you, you've learned it. From now on, you're my, Liuyan Ling's, person. Unless you die, you're my, Liuyan Ling's, personal disciple. Liuyan Ling also retorted without any trace of politeness. The two of them immediately quarreled. Aya. Quarreling is really intimate. Mrs. John Long covered her mouth and smiled like a flower. Let's go. Don't disturb the two of them. After saying that, she took Liu Lei's arm and pulled him out of the burial sword grounds. Hey, wait. I still have something to say. Liu Lei was pulled further and further away, and his voice became a little faint. Guhan boy, remember this. You're a person of my Yuzhang city, and you'll be a ghost of my Yuzhang city even if you die. 3 days later, go to Yuzhang University and report to Dean Ji. Tell him that I, Liu Lei, specially recruited you to Yuzhang University. Remember this, you must go. You're not allowed to go to Yuzhang University, Ling said to Guhan after coming out of the burial sword grounds and returning to the first floor of the sword pavilion. Impossible. Guhan frowned. I'm still a newcomer. Since I have the opportunity to further my studies at Yuzhang University, why not? Didn't I tell you? You're already my, Liuyan Ling's, disciple. I'll teach you whatever you want to learn, and it'll definitely be better than Yuzhang University. You might not know this, but our family's library is a few times bigger than Yuzhang University's library, said Liuyan Ling. That's enough. Guhan began to regret his decision to save Liuyan Ling for the sake of Liuyan Ling's family. He regretted exposing his talent, which resulted in Liuyan Ling wanting to take him in as a disciple. I, Guhan, will never become anyone's disciple. You can forget about it. You don't understand. You're a genius, do you know that? Liuyan Ling tried her best to persuade him. Geniuses are not something those mediocre teachers at Yuzhang University can teach. Only a genius like me can teach you. A genius? Guhan sneered. You're so talented that you need me to cheat for you. You. Liuyan Ling was speechless. She had forgotten that he had such an embarrassing handle on her. If she had known earlier, she would have gotten someone else to help her. But then again, she would not have gotten to know such an annoying fellow if she did not get his help to cheat. Hey, sour popsicle, you're finally out. My legs are going numb from waiting. The two of them arrived at the entrance of the library, where Song Hammer was waving at them. All right, my friend is here. Don't bother me anymore. Guhan glared at Liuyan Ling. I saved your life, so you owe me one. Remember this. Remember my ass. Let me ask you, what about my 5 fleeting forms? Do you think you can just leave after learning our swordplay? Liuyan Ling questioned. How about this? I promise you that I'll never use this 5 forms fleeting time again. Ji Han had the 9 swords of mysterious heaven, so of course he wouldn't be interested in the 5 forms fleeting time. You. Liuyan Ling rolled her eyes, and a plan came to her mind. Do you dare to promise that if you use the 5 fleeting forms again, you will become my personal disciple? If you can promise that, I won't pester you anymore. A mouthful of spit is worth a nail. If I say I won't use it, then I won't use it for the rest of my life. After saying that, Ji Han swaggered out without looking back. Wait. Liuyan Ling pulled on Gu Han's hand. What is it now? Gu Han stopped in his tracks and turned around helplessly. You still haven't answered me. How did you defeat Yi Xian without my guidance? Liuyan Ling couldn't figure out how Gu Han defeated Yi Xian. It's not that difficult. Just do it a few times according to the sequence of 12,345. Ji Han gave such an unreliable answer and walked out of the gate of the sword pavilion with Song Hammer, who wanted to ask something. Miss, have you obtained the Yi Xian sword? There was another person waiting for Liuyan Ling at the entrance. He had 3 sword ladies behind him, and it was clear that he was a famed swordsman. When Liuyan Ling got closer, the famed swordsman suddenly turned pale with fright. Miss, you're injured. Why are there so many wounds on your body? It's nothing. Liuyan Ling waved her hand. She had no intention of letting Gu Han off so easily. Chapter 60. Ding dong, you have a new message, please check it. Hello, respected new swordsman, Comrade Gu Han 360103298311112461785419. Congratulations on successfully synchronizing the natural ancient sword level sword Maiden Qingpin sword 10010. You have become an ancient sword level swordsman. Congratulations, Comrade Ji Han. You have become a citizen. Citizen ID 666103298311124617854119. Your citizen ID 360103298311124617854119 has become invalid. The system has automatically processed the change procedures for you. If you have any other questions, you can seek help from the Swordbearers Service Center. Congratulations, Comrade Ji Han. You are now a member of the Swordsman Committee. The Swordsman Committee ID is 888103298311124617854119. Your citizen ID is 666103298311124617854119. The system has automatically processed the change procedures for you. If you have any other questions, you can seek help from the Swordsman Service Center. Congratulations, Comrade Gu Han. Your information has been saved by the Sword Committee. You have become a junior member of the Sword Committee. All the benefits and obligations of a swordsman have been unlocked. Please go to the Sword Level Swordsman Service Center in 3 days to collect your new personal terminal. Congratulations, Comrade Gu Han. You have automatically obtained the right to live in the core of Yuzhang City. The system has automatically assigned you a house. Your new house is located in Sankingshan District, Block 15, Block B, Room 601. In the next 24 hours, our service guide will go to your original house to help you move your luggage. Please wait at home. Congratulations, Comrade Gu Han. You have become an ancient sword-level swordsman. You have been automatically assigned 3 citizen certificates. You can upgrade 3 citizens to citizen status. They will move with you to Sankingshan District, Block 15, Block B, Room 601. They will enjoy safer living conditions and a more convenient lifestyle. Gu Han, who had just returned home, was so stimulated by this series of messages that his head was buzzing. It was a headache. But in this world, who knew how many people had spent their entire lives chasing after this string of news? It was just like a newbie author from 1,000 years ago, chasing after that unreachable contract signing notice in the author's mailbox. Have I finally succeeded? After adjusting the messages to an infinite loop, Gu Han let his body fall to the floor. He let the hot tears fall from his eyes. The life he had been looking forward to for 12 years had finally become a reality. It was very strange. When he found out that his sword element had broken through 100, when he entered the sword pavilion to choose a sword lady, when he entered the sword burial grounds to steal the Yi's Yarn sword, when he found the Qingpin sword and successfully synchronized with her, Guhan didn't seem to feel anything. He didn't want to laugh, cry, tear, or laugh. But when he returned to the humble abode he had stayed in for 12 years, he saw his father, mother, and sister hanging on the wall, he saw the hundreds of stacks of books in his room, he saw the plans he had pasted everywhere, and he saw the plastic sword hanging on the door. Guhan cried. At this moment, he felt that his dream of 12 years had suddenly come true. "You're crying?" A pair of bare feet with 10 toes that looked like white jelly beans appeared on both sides of Guhan's vision. Her slightly meaty little butt sat on Guhan's chest. Her slightly curved jade-like palms drew circles on Guhan's face as if they were rubbing numbness. The tears that flowed from Guhan's eyes also soaked Guhan's entire face. "Why are you crying? Are you unhappy? Is it because of Qingpin?" Qingpin asked with widened eyes. "It has nothing to do with Qingpin." Jiyu Han's 2 large hands held onto Qingju's 2 small hands, pressing her firmly against his face. "I'm just saying goodbye to the past. The me today is no longer the me of the past. I've already liberated a little of myself." "Is that so?" Qingpin forcefully shook Guhan's head. "Qingpin is hungry. Qingpin wants to eat. Wait for me to get up. I'll make you hot and sour shredded potatoes." Guhan grabbed Qingpin's slender waist and carried her down from his body. In Guhan's fridge, aside from the convenient instant noodles, there were only potatoes and chili. Hot and sour shredded potatoes was the only dish Guhan knew how to make because it was the only dish he had learned when he was a child. Determined to become a chef like his father when he grew up, it took him a whole week to learn from his mother. He hadn't even learned the second dish when. At that time, Guhan was unexpectedly clumsy. "Ding dong, you have a new call requesting to connect. Your friend, Song Hammer, is requesting to connect. Would you like to connect?" Guhan, who was cutting shredded potatoes in the kitchen, suddenly received Song Hammer's call request. "Hello, what's the matter? I'm busy cooking. If you have something to say it quickly." Guhan said quickly. "Hey, sour popsicle, it's rare for you to cook. You don't eat instant noodles anymore?" Song Hammer was surprised. "Forget it, that's not important. Let me ask you, did you receive the identity change message from Bat?" "I received 7 messages in a row. I'll receive it sooner or later. If you want to talk to me about this, I'll just hang up. Qingpin is still waiting for me to cook." "Ari, you're lucky." Song Hammer sighed. "Your Qingpin is small, her appetite is definitely not big. My cloud cast iron ate all of my parents' meals, but she was only 30% full. Now, I have to buy takeout for her." Hearing Song Hammer's words, Guhan couldn't help but think of Cloud Cast Iron's huge body. He estimated that even 10 people's appetite would not be enough to satisfy her. "Hey, sour popsicle, since we have such a close relationship, I won't beat around the bush with you. Didn't you receive 3 citizenship quotas? Can you give one of them to me?" So this was the main purpose of Song Hammer's call. It was to ask Guhan for one of his 3 citizenship quotas. In this world, humans are divided into 3 classes: commoners, citizens, and nobles. Compared to the people, citizens could enjoy more material rations, more personal freedom, a safer living environment, and greater political rights. It can be said that becoming a citizen is every commoner's lifelong dream. It's just like how commoners in ancient times yearned to become a scholar. Generally speaking, there are only 2 ways for commoners to become a citizen. The first is to contribute enough to human society. The concept of contribution is very broad, and the calculation method is also very complicated. In short, it is a very difficult way. 99% of people work hard for their entire lives, but still can't reach the contribution requirement to become a citizen. Compared to the first method, the second method is very simple. One only needs to obtain a citizenship quota, which is a certificate of citizenship. Although such certificates are occasionally issued due to other reasons, 99% of the certificates are automatically given by the council when a commoner becomes a swordbearer. To put it bluntly, this certificate is a reward for the swordbearer, allowing them to fight for humanity with peace of mind. Generally speaking, these 3 certificates are directly used by the swordbearers on their parents, siblings, and loved ones, bringing them to a safer core area. Even if they die on the battlefield in the future, their relatives who have obtained citizenship can live a peaceful life. Songhammer has both parents and a pair of cute siblings. In terms of family life, he is much happier than Guhan. He is also the target of Guhan's deep jealousy. But now, there is a problem. Songhammer had to bring 4 family members into the core area, but he only had 3 spots. Songhammer has no choice but to ask Guhan shamelessly. After all, Guhan is alone. Sure. Guhan agreed without hesitation. I'll transfer the secret key to my certificate to you later. Thank you, Guhan. Without you, I really don't know what to do. Do you want me to leave Xiaolong or Xiaotu behind? Songhammer seemed to be on the verge of tears. Xiaolong and Xiaotu are also my siblings. I can't leave them in the city. Guhan can't help but think of Songhammer's 2 siblings. To be honest, Guhan doesn't have a good impression of Songhammer's younger sister. On the other hand, Guhan thinks that his younger brother is very cute. Well, let me ask one more thing. What do you plan to do with the remaining 2 quotas? Songhammer asked hesitantly. Of course, he knows that the 3 quotas are unnecessary for Guhan. I don't know. I'll keep them. Guhan quietly replied, Why do you ask this? Do you still need another quota when you find a girlfriend? No. How could I? Songhammer quickly denied. After hesitating for a while, he still said, It's like this. My mother's good friend, her husband sacrificed himself in the line of duty. She's alone with her daughter. My mother doesn't feel safe leaving her alone in the city. So, she wants to bring her into the core area. Stinky Toad, I'll be straightforward. Guhan finally finished cutting the potato shreds. I'm happy to give Xiaolong and Xiaotu a quota. Giving it to your mother's friend has nothing to do with me. Don't talk to me about this anymore. No, Sour Popsicle, you misunderstood. I, Songhammer, don't have the face to ask you about the remaining 2 quotas. But my mother's friend has also saved up some money. She can buy those 2 quotas from you. Buy my quota. Guhan hesitated. How much is she willing to pay? In Yuzhang City, there are also sword-bearers like Guhan who have less than 3 relatives. They will secretly sell their citizenship quota to others in exchange for a large sum of money to enhance their strength. However, there are not many sword-bearers born every day, so there are even fewer vacant quotas that are sold. Therefore, in the black market, such citizenship quotas have always been expensive. There are many wolves but not many meat. I've asked around. The current market price of a quota is 600,000. My aunt can barely gather 1 million. I know, Guhan, you'll be at a disadvantage. Just look, I understand. Guhan interrupted Songhammer. I can sell it to her for 1 million, but I want to see that woman. I want to know if that woman is worth my quota. Haha, don't worry. It's definitely worth it. It's definitely worth it. Songhammer laughed 3 times and let out a long sigh of relief. How about this? Aren't we going to the sword committee to do the paperwork in 3 days? We'll arrange a place for you to meet then, that's all. I'm hanging up. Guhan hung up. Sigh, he was distracted and the potato shreds were as thick as a finger. Chapter 61. On the 2nd day, Guhan logged into the game again. What are you doing? Guhan tapped the tip of the sword on his throat. Queen Yu, how did I make you angry? You actually have the face to ask this king why. It seems like you really forgot what you said. King Yu's sword tip pushed forward again. I'm going to kill you. You liar. You can't kill him. Suddenly, Qingpin's cold voice sounded. Your sword doesn't have any killing intent. This king just doesn't want to return to the endless darkness. King Yu snorted and retracted his sword. Who are you? You're hiding your head but showing your tail. You can actually sense if there's any killing intent on this king's sword. She's Qingpin's sword. I got her in real life. Ji Yuhan touched his throat and explained. He then looked at the void and asked doubtfully, "Poor, you still can't transform your mother into a physical body? In this world, Qingpin's body is sealed very strongly. Qingpin can't break through it," Qingpin replied. "Then why can you transform into a physical body in real life? Haven't you been sealed in real life?" "I don't remember," Qingpin said calmly. "Once I recovered my consciousness, I was in your hands." "Alright, as long as you don't find it boring to maintain the form of a sword." Gu Han carried Qingpin's sword on his back and looked at the system time. "King Yu, didn't you send anything over when I wasn't around?" "Mph. This king has been watching television and has no time to care about your stupid delivery," King Yu said coldly. "Oh no. This is bad." Gu Han patted his head in annoyance. "I bought a beautiful scabbard for you in the online game auction house. This is the result of me working for an entire night. I said that it would be sent to my sword tomb in an hour, so I slept for an hour before going online to look for you. It's actually not here yet." Logically speaking, Gu Han just randomly picked a beautiful and cheapest scabbard from the auction house and placed an order. After buying it, he immediately fell asleep and entered dreamland. Yesterday was the crusade mission, the battle with Yi Xian, and the planning of a new dungeon raid strategy. Ji Yuhan's spirit was almost overdrawn. He fell asleep the moment his head touched the pillow. "You're saying that you came one night late to choose a scabbard for me?" King Yu's expression instantly changed. He was a little cold, a little touched, and a little expectant. "Oh right, I remember now. Just now, something seemed to have fallen out of thin air and fell under the bed. Look for it and see if it's inside." The King of Yu looked as if he had just thought of it. "Strange. How did it fall directly under the bed?" Gu Han's words caused King Yu's face to turn red. Even a fool could guess that this delivery was kicked under the bed by the furious King Yu. Gu Han crawled under the bed and took out the tightly packed long box. He tore open the seal on the box and an antique, exquisite and elegant scabbard appeared in Gu Han's hands. Common scabbard, copper blade. After storing the sword Maiden, it recovers 0.8% of the sword Maiden's durability every second. After storing it for 28 minutes, the sword Maiden will return to its peak state. Usage restriction, famous sword Maiden, take a look and see if you like it. If you don't, I'll buy another one for you until you like it. Gu Han placed the scabbard in King Yu's hands and promised sincerely. Alright, to be honest, in order to buy this scabbard, Gu Han had already spent all the 10,000 renminbi he got from Mingyu. It was impossible for him to buy another one. Barely. This king has used hundreds of scabbards like this before. King Yu said that he didn't like it, but in reality, the more he looked at it, the more he liked it. He wanted to immediately enter the scabbard to experience it. "It's good that you like it. King Yu, do you want to go in and try this?" "I'll give it a try," King Yu answered happily. "Then I'll hold your hilt." Gu Han glanced at King Yu's plump butt. King Yu understood and nodded shyly. Gu Han's hand directly entered. With a push and pull, King Yu returned to his sword form and was sent into the scabbard by Gu Han. "King Yu, is it comfortable inside?" Gu Han asked through the scabbard. "Barely. I'll stay inside for a while longer," King Yu replied. "Only for a while. We're about to enter the dungeon." Before King Yu could react, he was tricked into a new dungeon by Gu Han. Although he was a swordsman and had the Qingpin sword, in this world, there were hundreds of ancient sword-level swordsmen who shed their blood on the battlefield every day. However, in this world, there were hundreds of ancient sword-rank swordbearers who shed their blood on the battlefield every day. There were also hundreds of ancient sword-rank swordbearers who were stuck at this level for the rest of their lives. If Gu Han didn't want to follow in their footsteps, he couldn't slack off and waste a single second. After resting for a night, Gu Han, who had recovered his energy, tricked King Yu into the scabbard and immediately entered the game. He started the strategy for Sword Lady Online 00002 Solo Dungeon. Ancient Sword Level Dungeon, Wudong's Apex was the second dungeon in Sword Lady Online's main dungeon. It was the next dungeon that every player had to pass after clearing the initial dungeon, King Yu's Gojian Jian. It was also the first dungeon of the ancient sword level dungeons. Only by clearing the Wudang's apex dungeon could one unlock the other 6 ancient sword-level dungeons. The Wudang's apex dungeon was not like King Yu's Gojian-jian. After hundreds of years, no one had cleared the SSS rank dungeon. In the 5th year after this dungeon appeared, the strongest ancient sword-level player at that time succeeded. There were many posts on the forums. As long as one was strong enough and followed the posts, about 10% of players could reach S rank and above, and 0.5% could reach SSS rank. However, this didn't mean that at SSS rank, Guhan couldn't surpass the achievements of others. It was just that the difficulty was shocking. The Wudang's apex dungeon described a story from 800 years ago. It was a story that really happened. At that time, the Kanzu calendar had already disappeared. Only 4 headquarter cities had been built, and the human forces were all holed up in the headquarter cities. However, after 200 years, there were still remnants of humans outside the headquarter cities. For example, on the highest peak of Wudang Mountain, there was still a group of humans who were stubbornly surviving. Under the protection of the True Force Sword, they opened up fields and dug out caves, living a secluded life. However, after 200 years of this secluded life, danger finally came to the peak. The Dark Dragon King, Yuan Ku, chose the Wudang's apex as his lair in the 3D world. Naturally, he decided to exterminate all humans within the range of Wudang Mountain. The True Force Sword, which protected Wudang, fought with the Dark Dragon King. Relying on a powerful skill, it successfully injured the Dark Dragon King, but at the same time, the wielder of the True Force Sword died. Without a wielder, the True Force Sword could no longer protect the peace of Wudang Mountain. Later, a wielder of Yangjin City accidentally entered the peak of Wudang Mountain. He saved most of the survivors and brought them back to Yangjin City. The apex dungeon of Wudang Mountain was based on this story, and Guhan entered the dungeon to play the role of the wielder of Yangjin City. He had to report the situation to the Yangjin base city before the Dark Dragon King regained its strength and launched another attack on the Wutang Mountain. He had to protect the Wutang Mountain with all his might before reinforcements from the base city arrived. System notification. Player Military Governor, welcome to the Apex Dungeon of Wudang Mountain. Mission objective. Protect the safety of 758 people at the apex of Wudang Mountain. The fewer the number of deaths, the lower the health loss, the higher the dungeon score. System notification. Mission 1 has been updated. Distress signal. The communication device you carried with you was damaged in the previous battle. However, the core components of the device are still intact. In the Golden Palace of the Golden Peak of Wudang Mountain, there is a 200-year-old broadcast device. You can remove the core components of the broadcast device to restore your connection with the base city. Guhan opened his eyes and saw that he was lying on a stone slab under a large tree. This was the standard starting point of the dungeon, the foot of Wudang Mountain. The distance from the Golden Peak to the Golden Peak was 1,600 meters, and it would take about 2 hours to get there on foot. There were 2 paths from the foot of the mountain to the Golden Peak. One was the main road, and the other was a small path. The main road was flat, and it would take about 2 hours to reach the Golden Peak. However, there were 3 fences set up by the Obsidian Dragon's subordinates to prevent humans from escaping from the top of the mountain. An average Ancient Sword Dreaming Souls player would need at least 2 hours to break through these fences. Including the 2 hours of climbing the mountain, it would take a total of 4 hours. Climbing the small path to the Golden Peak would take 3 hours, which was 1 hour faster than the main road. From this point of view, it seemed that the small path was the perfect choice. Not only could it avoid combat, but it could also buy more time. There was no better choice than the small path. However, according to the guide, this was a trap. While taking the small path could save time and avoid combat, it would definitely lose the chance of getting an SSS rating. This was because when players reached the top of the mountain, they would immediately trigger a storyline event. A group of Taoist priests would attempt to break through the blockade and escape Wudang Mountain. However, the Wudang Taoist priests had underestimated the defensive strength of the defense line. If they charged blindly, they would be completely wiped out. Not only would Guhan lose the few NPCs he had, but he would also suffer at least 15 casualties. The requirement for an SSS rating was that no more than 3 people died. This was far from an SSS rating. This battle was happening at the end of the main road. There was no intersection between the small path and the main road. If they went through the small path, they would not be able to stop the battle on the main road. As such, they had to kill their way up from the main road. They had to break through the blockade and regroup with the survivors before they could escape. Let's fight, King Yu. Guhan unsheathed the King Yu's Gojian sword. After a flash of starlight, the sword lady, King Yu, stood beside Guhan. Inhale, inhale. King Yu took a deep breath of the pure air of Wudang Mountain. Sword lady, King Yu, I can fight for you. Chapter 62. Mount Wudang was located in the northwest of Yi Province. Its height was not considered high, but the overall terrain of the mountain was extremely steep. Its surroundings were flat, allowing for the construction of all sorts of houses and Daoist monasteries. The middle of the mountain towered into the clouds, resembling a heavenly palace. At the beginning of the main road up the mountain, it was a dilapidated cement road with cracks everywhere. The cement road was about 10 meters wide, telling Guhan how smooth and spacious this road was 200 years ago. Unfortunately, in the dungeon 200 years later, only a portion of the cement road remained, recounting its history. This was the apocalypse 200 years after Earth was conquered by Yuan Ku. The first line of defense set up by the Black Dragon King was located at the foot of Mount Wudang, the only place that preserved traces of humans, the cable car entrance. Built in 2003 AD, the Mount Wudang cable car fully displayed the excellent quality of China's manufacturing industry 200 years ago. The cable car ropes of several thousand meters long were still intact, hanging from the cement pillars that extended up the mountain. A portion of the cable car carriages were still hanging below the ropes. However, their original colorful paint was completely mottled. However, more than half of the cable car entrance had collapsed. Only the ticketing hall that sealed off the main road entrance remained standing in perfect condition at the narrow mountain road intersection. 200 years ago, to prevent fare evasion, humans used the ticketing hall to perfectly seal off the entire path up the mountain. 200 years later, the Yuan Ku used this hall to seal off Guhan's rescue route up the mountain. Of course, Guhan did not care about this blockade, as long as he could kill his way through. The goblin mage Slime was currently in a good mood. Ever since he was lucky enough to be accepted by the Black Dragon King as a subordinate, he was assigned to this picturesque place as a guard. With dozens of subordinates at his beck and call, his days were carefree. The only downside was that there was too little entertainment. It would be even better if he could bring his goblin wife over. The long nights were very boring. Cough cough, the male goblins were too big, even some dirty deals couldn't be done. However, in recent days, the goblin mage Slime found something good. He found a human iPhone in a corner. The bottom button of the phone had already fallen off, leaving a small hole. Hehe, the slime really liked this phone. One day, the goblin mage Slime was hiding in his room, playing with his precious phone. Suddenly, there was an urgent knock on the door. Lord Mage, it's not good. A human sword wielder is coming, 3 of our brothers are dead. One of the goblin mage's subordinates was so agitated that they couldn't even speak clearly. Ah. After a long moan, a trembling voice came from the room. Kuji Yu, what kind of sword wielder is he? Is his sword mistress very powerful? Could it be the kind of skill that kills a large group with a single sweep? When the goblin mage Slime thought of sword wielder, he couldn't help but tremble in fear. When he and his subordinates first entered this world, they were very unlucky to meet a human sword wielder. That sword wielder's sword mistress was so powerful that it scared them to death. His fireball spell didn't have any effect on her body, and she swept her sword in the air, causing a large group of his subordinates to fall to the ground. Thinking back, he led an entire slim tribe of over 200 people into this world. After fighting with that sword mistress for less than 5 minutes, he only had a dozen subordinates left. If it wasn't for the Dark Dragon King's sudden appearance that caused the sword wielder to flee, he would have lost his life there. If the sword wielder they met this time could still sweep a large group like before, then he wouldn't say anything and immediately run for his life with his iPhone. Lord Mage, that sword mistress only knows shoddy sword skills, she's not even as good as me. But her weapon is really too powerful. A few of our brothers were grazed by it, and we immediately lost our lives. The subordinate replied. Oh, you're saying that she doesn't know that kind of sword aura that can sweep a large group? The goblin mage slime cried out in pleasant surprise. After a dozen seconds, she opened the door and raised her magic staff. Long live the Dark Dragon King, Zunaida. Let those sword wielder witness the power of the slime's fireball spell. When the goblin mage slime rushed to the scene of the battle, he saw an extremely ugly and disgusting human woman holding a sword being attacked by a dozen of his subordinates. Just like what the goblin who reported the news said, this woman's sword skills were really terrible. Even a 7 or 8-year-old brat's sword skills were better than hers. However, the number of spiked maces on the ground had increased from 3 to 5. It seemed like 2 more goblins were sacrificed when his subordinate reported the news. As for their corpses, they were probably sucked away by the dimensional whirlpool. King Yu, recall the sword moves I taught you as you fight. Don't forget to use them when you're anxious. You've wasted 5 minutes against these small fries. The goblin mage slime realized that behind the sword mistress, there was a human standing on a tree and saying something loudly. With every sentence the human said, the sword mistress's expression turned uglier, and her attacks became more ruthless. The human who was standing on the tree and talking was naturally Ji Yu Han. King Yu continued the state of forgetting sword techniques in the King Yu Go Gen Sword Instance dungeon and could not remember her King Yu sword technique. In a real fight, she was no match for Yuan Ku of the same level. Coincidentally, the Yuan Ku on this line of defense were the most trashy rat-level goblins. Yuan Ku goblins were naturally the best opponents for King Yu to practice her swordsmanship. After obtaining the 5 forms of fleeting time from Liuonian Ling, Guhan taught it to King Yu. That's right, Guhan had promised never to use the 5 forms of fleeting time again, but he had not promised not to teach it to his sword mistress. Yuan Ku name, Goblin Warrior. Level, Rat level. 2D World, Western Demonic Beasts. Instance Dungeons, all Western Demonic Beasts faction instance dungeons. Health, half a star. Attack, 1 star. Agility, half a star. Demonic power, none. Ability, holds a mace in his hand and uses it to launch sneak attacks. This is his specialty. Ultimate move, Wolf Fang Sneak Attack. Description, a cannon fodder soldier in the Western Demonic Beasts faction. The basic soldier type of the goblins and the most numerous soldier type. Though their abilities are too trashy, they consume little energy and are easy to feed. They are also quite obedient and good at fighting with ants. They are the subordinates of every Western demonic beast that aspires to become Yuan Ku's boss. If that Yuan Ku's boss doesn't have a goblin, he will be mocked by the other Yuan Ku. Despicable, why are these green-skinned bugs so nimble, to make this king be mocked by these despicable humans? This king will definitely kill all of you. King Yu's heart was about to explode. He wanted to grow a few hundred hands and kill these goblin warriors in front of him. However, King Yu was anxious and his hands became more and more disorderly. The goblin warriors took advantage of the gaps and fiercely hit him a few times. System notice. You have received damage, shield energy -1. System notice. You have received damage, shield energy -1. System notice. You have received damage, shield energy -1. Thanks to King Yu's famed sword physique, these goblin warriors only dealt the lowest amount of damage to King Yu's shield. However, King Yu's shield energy was decreasing at a visible rate. Under normal circumstances, famed sword wielders had at least 10,000 quarks of sword essence. Multiplied by King Yu's defense ratio of 0.95, King Yu's shield energy was 9,500. This damage was like a tickle to King Yu. However, Guhan had obtained King Yu through unorthodox means. He was still an ancient sword wielder with 500 quarks of sword essence, so King Yu's shield energy was only 495. 5 minutes into the battle, King Yu had already been hit more than 200 times by the goblin warriors, and he had lost more than 200 points of shield energy. He still had half of his shield energy left, but he had only killed less than a third of the goblin warriors. How could King Yu endure this? His opponent was the trashiest Yuan Yang. The more King Yu thought about it, the angrier he became. He casually slashed at the air, and there was actually a mistake in this move. He had clearly slashed at the air, but a goblin warrior had been possessed by the withered god and had tried to dodge in the opposite direction. As a result, he crashed into King Yu's sword. Even though it only grazed one of the goblin's arms, the goblin warrior's eyes widened and it died. King Yu's damage ratio was 0.062, multiplied by 500. Each slash dealt more than 30 points of damage. Adding on the fact that King Yu was a famed sword-grade sword maiden, he had a massive level suppression on the mouse elemental lizards. Almost every strike dealt perfect damage. The goblin warriors only had 20 or so HP, so naturally, he killed them with one strike. The corpses of the dead goblin warriors were sucked away by the dimensional vortex. It was as if their maces were made from this world's materials, so they weren't sucked away by the dimensional vortex and were left on the ground. Ch serves you right. You actually dared to provoke this king, King Yu said proudly, as if he had forgotten that he had just aimed at the air. Just as King Yu was feeling proud of himself, a crimson ball of light shot over and hit King Yu's face. System notice: you have received damage, shield energy -3. The goblin mage slime had finally attacked. Chapter 63. The scorching fireball fiercely hit King Yu's face. Then, like a mask, it completely covered her face. A few seconds later, the fire dissipated, but King Yu's face seemed to be burning. Damn it, you disgusting green-skinned brats, you dare to humiliate this king like this. This king will definitely kill all of you and execute you all. Queen Yu's anger had reached its limit. She attacked the goblins even more fiercely, but the result was that she was even more furious. She attacked the goblins more than 10 times, but she didn't hit the goblins. Instead, she took damage from 10 wolf fang maces and 3 fireballs. Queen Yu's shield energy was close to 200 points. King Yu, we don't have much time. Ji Yu Han, who was standing on the tree, looked at the time in the system and then jumped down from the tree. According to my calculations, you can still waste 2 minutes on these pieces of trash. However, I feel that even if I give you another 20 minutes, you probably won't be able to deal with them. Ji Yu Han said with a look of disdain. Who said that? You despicable person, you dare to look down on this king? This king doesn't even need a minute to get rid of these green-skinned ghosts. King Yu forcefully said. Hey, you two, don't speak. You actually dare to look down on Lord Slime? Can't you see the powerful Lord Slime standing in front of you? Hurry up and offer your flesh to Lord Slime to enjoy. The goblin wizard Slime was very dissatisfied as he declared his existence. What? Slime? King Yu looked at Guhan in confusion. Despicable person, aren't slime a very disgusting type of slimy worm? When did you become a goblin? I'll use chaotic reasoning behind you. Guhan suddenly said without answering the question. King Yu was stunned for a moment before immediately reacting. He used chaotic reasoning behind him and a goblin warrior that tried to sneak up was instantly beheaded. Actually, this is a rather famous joke. The move from the left is the sorrow of parting. Another head flew into the air. It's true that the green-faced wizard is a real goblin wizard, but his name is Slime. Close your eyes and use don't taste. The 3 goblin warriors who were about to team up collapsed. I've heard that he was raised by 7 slimes, so he's called Slimes. One more move, sorrow of parting. That's why he's called Slimes. And the last move, don't taste. In the time it took for him to explain the name of this goblin wizard, the surrounding dozen or so goblin warriors had actually been completely annihilated under Ji Yu Han's command. In reality, these goblin warriors were all ancient sword saint rank, and with the help of the goblin mags, they were equivalent to intermediate ancient sword saint rank players. If an ordinary ancient sword saint player were to face these goblin warriors head-on, not only would their chances of success be low, but they would also have to waste a lot of time. According to the guide, the best way was to sneak into the room of the goblin mage Slime in the ticket hall and fight him one-on-one. As long as he got rid of the goblin mage, the rest of the goblin warriors would flee and collapse without a fight. However, this instance dungeon had no time requirements, so there was no need to save time. Moreover, with King Yu's famed sword rank, even if he was suppressed, it did not matter. That was why Guhan fought head-on so that King Yu could train his swordsmanship. To achieve this goal, Guhan specially instructed King Yu not to use basic skills to prevent the training results. You. The goblin mage slime panicked. This was not right. How did that noob sword mistress wipe out his subordinates in the blink of an eye? Despicable person, you dare to order me around. After killing all the goblin warriors, King Yu was clearly in a good mood. Even though she was still criticizing Guhan, she was smiling like a flower. There's still 1 minute and 20 seconds. Guhan smiled and pointed at the confused goblin mage slime. I'll leave this one to you. My Queen Yu, since you're so strong, 1 minute and 20 seconds should be enough to deal with him. Of course. King Yu raised her head to prevent Guhan from seeing her panicked expression. Unfortunately, her panicked voice betrayed her. I can kill this slime in 1 minute. You too. You dare to kill Lord Slime's subordinates? You're dead. You're dead. Lord Slime will use a large fireball to kill you. The goblin mage slime raised his magic staff and started chanting an obscure mana language. From the time it took to chant, it was indeed more powerful than the fireball spell. You fool, you dare to chant a spell in front of me. Seeing the goblin mage start chanting, King Yu was about to laugh. He really wanted to sleep with a pillow. Under the pressure of that despicable person, Guhan, he could forcefully kill his opponent in 1 minute. However, King Yu didn't have the confidence to hit that skinny and nimble goblin mage. Now, this mage was courting death by wasting a lot of time. He stood still and channeled. Wasn't this meat delivered to him? The happy King Yu's charge sped up. In 2 seconds, he arrived in front of the goblin mage slime. He raised his Gojian sword and chopped down on the goblin mage slime's head. Like a soap bubble, the goblin mage slime's body suddenly shattered and turned into water, disappearing into the air. System notice: you have destroyed the goblin mage slime's water membrane illusion. Water membrane illusion was the ultimate skill of water magic. It allowed the caster to create an illusion of himself. Under the cover of the illusion, the caster would disappear for 3 seconds. It turned out that the goblin mage had been lying to the King of Yu about the great fireball. His true goal was to use the water barrier to escape from the dangerous sword wielder and sword lady. Aya, I didn't expect this goblin mage to have some intelligence. He actually knows how to use water membrane illusion. Guhan smiled as he walked over and patted King Yu's shoulder. Don't worry, he escaped anyway. Your mission is complete. You didn't kill the opponent, so don't worry. Humph. King Yu was unhappy. He fiercely stomped on Ji Yuhan's foot and slashed open the iron gate that was locked by the iron lock. Ignoring Ji Yuhan behind him, he walked straight into the Wudong Mountain scenic area. Ari, he's not very capable, but he has a big temper. Guhan shook his head and picked up an iPhone from the ground. It was sticky and seemed to have been dropped by the slime. Slime knows how to use a phone. Alright, if Ji Yuhan knew the actual use of this phone, he would definitely want to chop off his own fingers. Yuan Ku name, Goblin Mage, Slime. Level, Tiger. 2D World, Western Magical Beasts. Appearance Instance Dungeon, all Western Magical Beasts Faction Instance Dungeons. Health, 1 star. Attack, 1, 5 star. Agility, 1 star. Demonic Power, 1 star. Ability, wields an elm staff and can use primary and low-level mana. Ultimate skill, Fireball, large fireball. Description: a cannon fodder unit of the Western Magical Beast faction. A powerful unit of the Goblin race. It is also one of the most powerful units. It can learn any of the 6 elements of magic, and after advancing to become a Goblin Great Wizard, it can even use powerful intermediate magic. Legend has it that the Goblin Slime was raised by the 7 Slimes. He joined the nearby Goblin tribe and became the tribe's mage. After coming to the 3-dimensional world, he answered the Dark Dragon King Zunida's call and joined his army. Although Zunida looked down on the slime's strength, he still rewarded him with a water intermediate mana scroll, Water Membrane Illusion. Mount Wudong's scenery was famous for its ethereal beauty. As a Daoist holy land during the Ming dynasty, with the addition of the legend of Zhong Sanfeng, Mount Wudong naturally took over the title of Mount Longhu as the #1 Daoist mountain, becoming the core area of Taoism during the Ming dynasty. In the entire Ming dynasty, Mount Wudong had a total of 129 Daoist temples and over 1,000 rooms. Before the apocalypse, Mount Wudong had over 1,000 Taoists and over 10,000 residents. However, with the advent of the apocalypse, the Daoist temples at the foot of Mount Wudong were basically destroyed. Less than 10% of the residents survived. The rest all hid at the top of the mountain. Other than stray cats and dogs, there was not a single living person in the entire Daoist temple on Mount Wudong. The Purple Sky Hall was located at the southeast of Mount Wudong at the foot of the banner-spreading peak. It was one of the largest Daoist buildings of Mount Wudong. Before the apocalypse, there were 29 buildings with a construction area of 6,854 square meters. The central axis was a 5-tiered land. From top to bottom, there were the Dragon Tiger Hall, the Steely Pavilion, the Shifang Hall, the Purple Sky Hall, and the Holy Mother Runes Hall. The two sides were divided into 3 courtyards by the auxiliary buildings, forming a group of halls and buildings. Well, the above text was the description that Guhan found from the Baidu Encyclopedia of the Middle Ages. In fact, other than the dungeon in the game, the Purple Sky Hall of Mount Wudong could no longer be found in the real world. 800 years ago, which was also the time when the dungeon took place, the Purple Sky Hall was completely burned to a pile of rubble by the Dark Dragon King's demonic flames. In fact, after that battle, the entire Mount Wudong was shaved off by 30 meters. The entire mountain had changed completely, and 90% of the buildings no longer existed. However, in the game, the Purple Night Palace still existed perfectly on this piece of land. However, just like the ticketing office, the Purple Night Palace had been completely occupied by Yuan Yang. As the second line of defense, it controlled the entire road. Chapter 64. I'm telling the truth. Glutton, organize your subordinates and stop the pair of sword-bearers. In the Purple Night Hall, a huge ogre with gloves on his hands lay on a bed made up of a few offering tables. He threw live cats that were shrieking miserably into his mouth, as if he was eating multi-taste peanuts. He ate them one at a time with great joy. Move to the side. The Arabian head smashed into the head of the goblin mage slime, sending it flying several meters away. If not for the nimbleness of the goblin's small body, it would have been smashed half to death. Ogres are powerful, but goblins are trash. They're not fit to stand with ogres. Yes. The great ogre leader, Glutton. Lowly goblins are not fit to stand with ogres. The slime was beaten up, but he had to praise the ogre leader. The goblin wanted to tell the ogre leader that 2 young humans are coming, and they have soft skin and tender flesh. The ogre leader must not miss them. Humans. Delicious. It's been a long time since I've eaten them. The ogre leader licked his lips. The kittens that were munching on the meat were no longer delicious. He tossed the kitten in his hand into his mouth and then threw the remaining cat on the table to his 4 subordinates. Aogu. Follow the great glutton. Delicious. Ogu. The 4 ogres patted their chests and roared as they followed the Arab head out of the violet firmament hall. They were fantasizing about the beautiful future of feasting on human flesh as they blocked the path to the Purple Night Hall. Have you memorized the important points that I've explained to you? After breaking through the first goblin blockade, Guhan tried his best to explain to King Yu how to use his swordsmanship for the next battle. For the next battle against the ogres, Guhan intended to let King Yu train his swordsmanship. In the next battle, there will be a total of 5 ogres, 4 ogre warriors and 1 ogre boxer. Guhan told King Yu about the instance dungeon information that he had obtained from the forum. Among them, the ogre warriors use axes that are over a meter long. Because these axes are very heavy, their damage is very high. An ancient sword rank sword maiden will lose at least 30 points of shield energy after being hit by the axe. Even with your famed sword rank physique, you will probably lose 3 to 5 points of shield energy. This should be enough to break through your defense. However, the axes of the ogre warriors are too big and heavy, so their attack speed is very slow. On average, They can only attack once every 3 seconds. Therefore, when fighting against warriors, what he needed to do was to identify their attack trajectories, make predictions, and dodge their attacks. Then, he could use the 5 fleeting time styles to counterattack. Their bodies are large, and their dodging abilities are poor. With your lousy sword technique, you will be able to hit them, so you don't have to worry about accuracy. As such, the key to fighting is to dodge the attacks of the ogres. Your shield energy can only withstand around 20 attacks. You must kill the 4 ogre warriors before the shield disappears. Do you understand? That's right, the ogres have thick skin and have around 300 HP. You will probably need to attack 10 times to kill 1 ogre warrior. Then there's the ogre boxer. His attack power is about the same as a warrior's, and he can only deal around 3 to 5 points of damage. However, his attack speed is very fast, and his accuracy is very high. If he joins the fight, I don't think you will be a match for him. As such, I will first restrain the ogre boxer so that he cannot join the fight. You can fight the 4 ogre warriors without worry and train your sword technique. You will restrain the ogre boxer. King Yu looked at Guhan in disbelief. Although your sword technique is indeed very powerful, this king will be fighting the ogre warriors. What will you rely on to deal with the ogre boxer? This. Guhan patted the Qingpin sword on his back. I still have her. Are you stupid? You can only use 1 sword lady to fight at the same time. If this king is fighting, you cannot use the Qingpin sword. King Yu asked suspiciously. The reason why we sword wielder can only use 1 sword lady at the same time is because the sword lady is unable to fight alone. We have to rely on the sword wielder to transfer the sword essence to the sword lady. With the support of the sword essence, the sword lady can fight. However, the sword wielder can only have 1 sword scar in his body at the same time, so he can only transfer the sword essence to 1 sword lady. However, if I don't need to transfer the sword essence to the Qingpin sword through the sword scar, and only use the Qingpin sword itself, it doesn't matter. Guhan explained. This is the strength of a sword master. In a sense, a sword master can fight with 2 sword ladies at the same time. If I can't transfer the sword essence through the sword scar, then what's the difference between the Qingpin sword and an ordinary sword? King Yu was furious. A sword lady made of ordinary iron is as easy to break as a tree branch in front of Yuan Ku. If you use the Qingpin sword like this, aren't you afraid of breaking her body? That depends on who is using it. Guhan tapped King Yu's head. If it's you, even 1,000 Qingpin swords will break, but if it's me, even 1,000 ogre boxers won't be able to break my Qingpin sword. I smell it. It's lunch. Standing in the middle of the road, the ogre boxer Big Gulp took a deep breath and licked his fat lips. At the other end of the road, the figures of Guhan and King Yu gradually became clearer. Aogu, the 2 of you, go and capture those 2 people. Big Connoisseur wants to eat boiled meat slices today. Big Connoisseur ordered 2 of his 4 subordinates. In his view, 2 powerful ogre warriors were enough to deal with these skinny humans. Aogu. The subordinates roared, raised their axes, and charged at Guhan and King Yu. Go, King Yu. Remember what I told you. Guhan whispered in King Yu's ear. King Yu blushed and spat. He raised his Qingpin sword and charged at the 4 ogres. Soon, the 2 sides clashed. The ogre at the front saw the tender King Yu and immediately became hungry. He raised his large axe high and swung it down, trying to kill the sword maiden with 1 blow. Queen Yu was already prepared for the axe. She focused on the opponent's movements. When she saw the axe raised high, she immediately dodged to the left. Though her movements were clumsy, she was still nimble. The ogre's axe missed its target. Ha. Seeing that he had dodged successfully, the Yu King beamed with joy. He took this opportunity to stab the ogre warrior a few times. System notice. You have dealt damage to ogre warrior, -30. System notice. You have dealt damage to ogre warrior, -30. System notice. You have dealt damage to ogre warrior, -30. With 3 slashes, the ogre warrior's HP dropped by 1/3. Despicable scum, do you see this king's exquisite sword art? King Yu proudly waved the King Yu Gojian sword at Ji Yu Han. Be careful of your back. Guhan looked at King Yu as though he was looking at an idiot. What? Back? King Yu was stunned. Then, she felt something hit her back. She flew a few meters away and fell heavily to the ground. The second ogre warrior that arrived behind the first ogre warrior swung his axe at the King of Yu. System notice: you have taken damage. Shield energy loss, -5. At the same time, the first ogre warrior raised his great axe and slashed at the King of Yu. In the end, King Yu was hit by the second ogre warrior's axe. System notice: you have taken damage. Shield energy loss, -4. Damn it. While the first ogre warrior finished its attack and raised its axe again, King Yu crawled up from the ground. At this moment, the second ogre warrior's attack came. The Yu King's sword tapped on the large axe and used the rebound force to increase the distance between him and the ogre warrior. The ogre warrior's attack missed, and he also left a furious sword mark on the ogre warrior's body. As a result, the King of Yu and the two ogre warriors clashed. From the battle situation, Ji Yuhan's training and teaching of King Yu was very effective. If it was said that King Yu's skills were like that of a 3-year-old in the battle against Steeltooth and the goblins, then he was now around 10 years old. Facing the pincer attack of the two ogre warriors, King Yu was able to dodge them all. Apart from being hit twice at the start, King Yu wasn't attacked by the ogre warriors anymore. On the contrary, King Yu's sword was able to hit the ogre warrior's body every time, and his 5 forms fleeting time was starting to look decent. The Sword Maiden is the Sword Maiden. Though she's forgotten her swordplay, once she starts to practice, her talent in swordplay will become very great. Behind King Yu, Guhan muttered to himself as he watched him fight. Ever since he started to nurture King Yu's swordplay, Guhan understood that the Sword Maiden had great talent in swordplay. However, could a Sword Maiden without talent still be considered a Sword Maiden? Soon, under King Yu's increasingly skilled attacks, the two ogre warriors' HP dropped to half. This made Abbasid, who was watching from the back, extremely vexed. He quickly ordered the remaining 2 ogre warriors to join the fight. Orgu. Orgu. The third and fourth ogre warriors joined the fight, and King Yu's advantage instantly turned into a disadvantage. Surrounded by 4 ogre warriors, King Yu began to struggle. Dodging was no longer easy. After dodging 3 strikes, he would not be able to dodge the 4th. In a short minute, King Yu had been hit more than 10 times, and his shield lost over 60 points of energy. The situation was extremely dangerous. Chapter 65. A small building on the right side of the Sword Pavilion in Yuzhang City had always been the residence of the Sword Pavilion Master. The Sword Master was responsible for protecting the entire Sword Pavilion and protecting the sleeping Sword Lady from any threats. According to the iron rules of the Sword Committee, the Sword Master was not allowed to leave the Sword Pavilion for more than 3 hours unless there was a crisis that threatened the survival of mankind. They were also not allowed to leave the core area of the base city. Therefore, this position was especially suitable for those powerful sword-bearers who had decided to retire in peace. For example, the current Sword Master, Liu Lei, retired from the world at the age of 80 and took over the position of Sword Master. Since then, he had never appeared in the world again. At this moment, Liu Lei's eyes were closed, and he was lying on the bamboo rattan rocking chair in a deep sleep. However, no one knew that he was currently communicating with someone 1,000 miles away through a hidden communication line. Liu Sancha, you old man. You're living a leisurely life in retirement, aren't you? Judging from the voice, the person on the other end of the communication should also be an old man. Ha! Old wooden fish, you're living a more comfortable life than I am. How is it? Your precious granddaughter has taken back the Yishen sword. Are you happy now? I risked being expelled from the Sword Committee to remove the seal on the Yishen sword. Shouldn't you make it up to me? Liu Lei laughed. He could tell from his words that the person on the line was none other than Lionian Ling's grandfather, Fleeting Wooden Fish, the former family head of the Lionian family. If my Liunian family wants something, he wouldn't dare say no to it. Flowing Time Wooden Fish said disdainfully. Since the Lionian family is so powerful, I'm curious. Why did you agree to the Sword Committee's stupid suggestion? Your granddaughter has suffered a lot in the hands of Yixian. If it weren't for that stupid kid, she would have lost her life, Liu Lei said sarcastically. I don't believe that sword celestial cloudy sky, Liu Sanxia, doesn't have a backup plan. If my granddaughter dies in front of you, then you might as well give up on living, Fleeting Time Wooden Fish said indifferently. Alright, old wooden fish, let's not talk about this. This is the first time you've taken the initiative to contact me in 18 years. What's your purpose? Could it be that your precious granddaughter's leisurely immortal sword encountered some unforeseen event or trouble again, and you want me to take responsibility for it? The Yixian sword is a little troublesome, but that's Ling's problem. As the successor of the Lionian clan, what use is she if she can't even subdue a mere Yixian sword? I'm not looking for you for the wandering immortal sword, but for the Qingpin sword. Fleeting Time Wooden Fish spat out the words Qingpin sword. Qingpin sword. I seem to have heard of it somewhere. Let me think. I'm getting old and muddle-headed. I clearly heard this name yesterday. Liu Lei thought for a while and said, I remember now. It's the silly boy who saved your granddaughter. The sword Maiden he got from the sword burial grounds is called the Qingpin sword. Yes, that Qingpin sword. On the other end of the call, Fleeting Time Wooden Fish's tone turned strange. Old thing, give me some face and take back the sword of poverty. Take it back. Liu Lei's rocking chair suddenly stopped moving, and his expression turned grim. Did I hear that right, old wooden fish? You're telling me to take back the Qingpin sword? You're right. The Qingpin sword belongs to the Lionian clan. It's something passed down from Patriarch Liu Nian's grandmother. It's only right for the Lionian clan to take it back, Fleeting Time Wooden Fish said firmly. Are you crazy? The sword is already synchronized with that silly boy. If you take back the Qingpin sword, you'll break his sword mark and ruin his entire life. Your granddaughter should have reported this to you by now. His talent in swordsmanship is even greater than yours. He might even become a powerful swordmaster who can support the human race. How can you ruin such a genius just because you say so? No, even if this Guhan sword doesn't have any talent, as long as he's still human, I will not allow the Lionian clan to break the rules of the human race. Liu Lei grew agitated. He could not understand why the fleeting time world, the pillar of humanity, would destroy the future of a wielder with a bright future, all for the sake of an ancient sword. Why would the fleeting time world trample on the rules that had kept humanity united for 1,000 years? Liu Lei, I'm begging you. I'm begging you, promise me. Fleeting Time Wooden Fish was silent for a while before he spoke with a heavy tone, enunciating each word clearly. I understand now. Old wooden fish, you're afraid of a sword master who's even stronger than the Lionian clan. I know that the Lionian clan's master has always been the strongest swordmaster in the world. You're afraid that the crown will fall from your heads, aren't you? Nonsense. Which era has there been a sword master whose talent in swordsmanship surpasses the Lionian clan? Are you saying that the Lionian clan is going to cripple all of them? If we're going to cripple them, we might as well just kill them. That way, no one will gossip about the Lionian clan. The only reason the Lionian clan is able to maintain our reputation as the strongest swordmaster is because of our hard work and training. Don't you know that? Then what's the reason? Old wooden fish, if you don't give me a reason that I can't refuse, I will not allow this to happen, Liu Lei said firmly. Very well, take a look at this. Fleeting Time Wooden Fish passed a document to Liu Lei. Sword Essence Test Records of the People's Guhan? Liu Lei read out the name of the document. It was a record of Guhan's sword essence test from the moment he was born. Do you see it? From 1 to 5 years old, his sword essence increased from 1 quark to 9 quarks. After 5, his sword essence stopped growing. Until 4 days ago, his innate sword essence value was still 9 quarks. But yesterday, in just 3 days, he increased his acquired sword essence value by 101 quarks. Don't you think it's very strange? It's a little strange. Liu Lei knocked on the armrest of the rocking chair. But it's not strange. As long as he's willing to spend money to buy sword essence pills, it's not strange to increase his sword essence by 1,000 quarks in a day. No, I'm not talking about how he increased his sword essence by 100 quarks in 3 days. It's very strange. I'm talking about how his sword essence value hasn't increased at all since he was 5 years old. It's very strange. Fleeting Wooden Fish's words were filled with an evil aura, and Liu Lei instantly felt a chill run down his spine. The truth was that in the past 12 years, during the period when the sword essence grew the fastest, the amount of sword essence did not increase by even a single quark. This was indeed very strange. Why? Why is it like this? Liu Lei mumbled to himself. Old thing, you've also reached the status of an immortal sword tier. I think you've heard of that person 700 years ago whose name can't even be spoken. Fleeting time Wooden Fish's tone began to tremble. He, the head of the world's #1 family, was actually beginning to feel fear. Could it be that this Guhan and that person? The rocking chair under Liu Lei's buttocks could not withstand the surging sword essence around him, and it immediately exploded into a pile of dust. Liu Lei stood on the ground and opened his eyes that had been closed all this time. That person, that person. Liu Lei's expression changed countless times. Finally, he gritted his teeth and made a decision. Old Wooden Fish, it's fine if you don't mention that person. Since you've brought it up, I'll tell you. 700 years ago, we humans let him down. 700 years later, I don't want to let his descendants down. Even if that Guhan destroys the entire world, we owe his family. Liu Lei, admit it. Don't be agitated, Liu Sancha. I heard the explosion. You're still as hot-tempered as ever. It's been 20 years, and you still haven't toned it down. I've already toned it down a lot, Old Wooden Fish. Otherwise, the entire house would have been blown to smithereens. I admit that we humans owe him. I don't intend to do anything to him or ruin his future. However, I must take back the Qingpin sword. The Qingpin sword can be in anyone's hands, but not his. Mph, let's not talk about the mysteries of the Qingpin sword. Let me ask you, what's the difference between taking back the Qingpin sword and destroying his sword mark and destroying his future? Of course there's a difference. Fleeting time Wooden Fish laughed. Our family has a few of the green silk severing sword. Liu Lei was momentarily speechless. The severed green silk could perfectly sever the connection between the wielder of any sword below the level of an immortal sword and the sword mistress. If the severed green silk was used on Jiyu Han, not only would it not harm his future, it might even make him stronger. However, the green silk slasher was something that even an immortal sword tier sword wielder like Liu Lei would throw away his pride and use all of his strength to fight for. Yet, he had actually used it on a mere ancient sword tier sword wielder. This was an extreme waste of a heavenly treasure, and it was the epitome of extravagance. Old geezer, I'll take your silence as a yes. I'll send someone to retrieve the Qingpin sword in a few days. Wait. Liu Lei pursed his lips. I still can't accept it. At least not in Yuzhang City. Mph, you can't bear to part with your pride, are you? Fleeting time Wooden Fish snorted, forget it. He'll have to leave the city to complete his quest sooner or later. It'll be more convenient to make a move on him outside the city. Just don't interfere when the time comes. With that, Fleeting time Wooden Fish hung up the call. Rubbish. A ripple-like sword chi swept up from beneath Liu Lei's feet, sweeping away the debris and dust that were left on the ground after the rocking chair had been smashed. Chapter 66. My eyes aren't enough. King Yu, who was surrounded by 4 ogre warriors, struggled to deal with the attacks of 4 axes. She gradually felt powerless. Her eyes could only see to the left and right. She couldn't deal with the attacks coming from behind. Use your senses. Feel the wind, feel the air, feel the will, trust your body. Your sword maiden's instincts will tell you where to hide. Jiyu Han, who was watching, noticed King Yu's predicament, and commanded loudly from behind her. Use my body to feel. King Yu laughed in anger. Your words are like farting. Although she felt that Guhan was farting, King Yu closed her eyes and decided to do as Guhan said. She used her body to feel the enemy's attacks. The result was that King Yu ate 4 axes in a row and couldn't dodge even once. Damn it, this king won't believe this despicable liar anymore. King Yu thought angrily and was about to open her eyes. Suddenly, a subconscious thought flashed through her body, telling her to dodge to the left. King Yu's body tilted slightly to the left and brushed past the axe coming from behind. It's really effective. King Yu was a little excited. At this moment, another subconscious thought appeared and told her to bend down. King Yu was indeed a natural sword maiden. His comprehension and quality were extremely high. After being touched by Ji Han, he seemed to have changed into a different person. He no longer dodged in a sorry state. Instead, he flew through the flowers like a butterfly, not touching a single leaf. How enviable! Seeing King Yu quickly comprehend what he had spent a month to comprehend, Gu Han couldn't help but feel envious. However, Ji Han seemed to have forgotten that King Yu was not a newbie with no foundation in the way of the sword. Her sword skills had long been deeply engraved into her soul. It was just that when she awakened, she forgot how to use it. If Ji Han was only slightly jealous, then the ogre boxer on the other side felt that things were getting out of hand. Things weren't going according to his script, and it seemed like his 4 underlings wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. Aogu. Let Big Gobbler kill you personally. The ogre boxer Abbasid Khan decided not to put on airs and wait in the back. Instead, he was going to swing his fists and personally take the field. Finally can't hold it in anymore? Gu Han noticed the ogre boxer's movement. The 4 ogres are the best training opponents for King Yu. A mere ogre boxer should stay there. Gu Han grabbed Ching Pin's sword from his back and leapt 5 meters into the air. He then used the cliff beside him to propel himself over King Yu's group and stood in front of the ogre boxer. Because the famed sword Lady King Yu's physique was increased by 50% to Gu Han's physique was greatly strengthened. If King Yu was in sword form and held by Gu Han, then 100% of King Yu's physique would be added to Gu Han's body. At that time, jumping 10 meters into the air and even flying for a short period of time would not be impossible. P.S. The author would like to apologize to everyone. Due to certain reasons, an important setting was left out in the previous chapters. The author would like to add that when the sword lady is in sword form, 50% of her physique will be added to the wielder. When the sword lady is in sword form and held in the wielder's hand, 100% of her physique will be added to the wielder. This is the case in both the real world and the game. This is why Gu Han could use his mortal body to unleash all kinds of sword chi and engage in a melee with the powerful Yuan Ku. In truth, this setting should have been explained in the King of Yu's Go Jian Jian instance, but the author wrote too quickly and forgot. My apologies. Your opponent is me. Gu Han's Ching Pin was pointed at the ogre boxer's Arabian head's nose. Augu. The Arabian head will kill you first, human. The ogre boxer was enraged. His fists, covered in gauntlets of pure metal, smashed at the 4 scars on Gu Han's face. If these blows landed, Gu Han's head would probably be pulverized. Too slow. With the physique of the sword lady, the ogre boxer's movements were too slow in the eyes of an expert swordsman like Gu Han. Gu Han could easily dodge the Arabian head's iron fists. Yuan Ku name, ogre boxer, Arabian head. Rank, Phantom. 2-dimensional world, Western Magical Beasts Instance Dungeons, all Western Magical Beasts Faction Dungeons. HP, 2 stars. Attack, 5 stars. Agility, 1 star. Demonic power, none. Ability, heavy gauntlets made of pure metal. Every strike has a force of 800 kilograms and can shatter an opponent's skull with a single strike. Ultimate move, Cannon Iron Fist, Charged Strike. Description: the ogres are the core strength of the Western magical beasts. They have more than 30 different types of soldiers, ranging from tiger to dragon. They have a clear hierarchy of power and are a large group of creatures. The ogre boxer is the weakest force of the ogre tribe. The Arabian head was abandoned by his tribe when he was young. Later on, he came to the 3-dimensional world and was subdued by the Dark Dragon King as his subordinate. He is extremely loyal to the Dark Dragon King's Unida. The Arabian head loves human flesh. He once ate an entire village of humans. When there are no humans to eat, he likes to eat kittens and puppies. He is an extremely vicious opponent. The Arabian head is very strong in close combat. Even among the Phantom Yuan Ku, he is one of the top close combat soldiers. However, he is extremely afraid of long-range attacks. With his great mastery of swordsmanship, Guhan could not find it easier to toy with the ogre boxer. Guhan acted like he was toying with a child. No matter how fast the ogre boxer punched, the tip of Qing Pin's sword would always strike the ogre boxer's wrist. In just a few short minutes, the ogre boxer's wrist was already riddled with holes. Aogu, Aogu, Aogu. The Arabian head will definitely kill you, you wretched human. The great connoisseur wants to crush your bones and suck out your marrow. The ogre boxer howled incessantly, but at the same time, he was panting like a tired old bull. Fine, I'll change your opponent. Suddenly, the ogre boxer, who had punched nothing but air no matter how many times he punched, realized that the human who was as nimble as a monkey had suddenly disappeared. Aogu. This despicable human must be afraid of the Arabian head's strength and ran away. The ogre boxer did not know if he was truly stupid or just pretending to be so. But since the human had fled, it was time to go and help his subordinates. However, when the ogre boxer looked at the location of the previous battle, he was immediately dumbfounded. Of his 4 subordinates, 3 had disappeared, and the remaining one was lying on the ground. Beside his corpse, a dimensional vortex was forming. A few seconds later, the corpse of the 4th ogre warrior was sucked into the dimensional vortex, leaving no trace. All 4 of them were killed. The Arabian head could not help but feel a chill run down his spine, and he began to think that perhaps he should run for his life. But at this moment, King Yu, who had finished killing the 4 ogre warriors, charged forward and slashed at the Arabian head. Forget it, don't even think about escaping, just kill this little girl. Aogu. The Arabian head shouted without any innovation and began to fight with King Yu. Logically speaking, the pressure that King Yu felt from one ogre boxer was even greater than when he had faced 4 ogre warriors. Although the 4 ogre warriors were numerous, their attacks were simple and easy to dodge. King Yu could rely on his instincts to dodge. However, the ogre boxer's weapon was not a clumsy axe, but a light gauntlet. His attacks were fast and precise, on a completely different level from the ogre warriors, Yuan Ku. From the start, King Yu took 2 solid punches and lost more than 50 points of shield energy. This made King Yu feel like he was going to fail miserably. What should I do? Panicking, King Yu actually took the initiative to ask Guhan. If this was the previous King Yu, he would rather die than ask Guhan. He actually took the initiative to ask. Guhan was both surprised and gratified by King Yu's change. Since your body can't dodge, then don't dodge. Use your full strength and attack the opponent's fist. Attack the fist. When King Yu saw the ogre boxer's fist coming at him, he decisively stopped dodging and slashed back with his sword. The ogre boxer had not expected such a response. He was forced back a few steps, and his attack instantly dissipated. Chance. King Yu's swordsmanship instincts were becoming more and more obvious. At this moment, she immediately found an opportunity to attack. 5 forms fleeting time surged towards the ogre boxer like a tidal wave. A few minutes later, the ogre boxer's body heavily fell backwards. A dimensional vortex appeared and sucked his corpse back into the 2-dimensional world. Congratulations, you've recovered at least 20% of your previous swordsmanship strength. You can barely handle the upcoming battle. Do your best. Guhan took out a towel from somewhere and handed it to King Yu to wipe the sweat off her face. Thank you. King Yu hesitated for a moment before taking the towel and wiping the sweat off her face. A man's scent entered King Yu's nose. Damn it, this despicable human actually dares to give this towel that he used before to this king. This king is confiscating this towel. After wiping the sweat off her face, King Yu stuffed the towel into her sword sheath. I forgot to mention that the sword sheath can also store some personal belongings of the sword lady. It should not be too big. As you wish. Guhan nodded and did not take the towel to heart. He also did not notice the blush on King Yu's face. Chapter 67. Elder, are we really going to charge in? In a dense forest, a group of Taoist priests dressed in black and white Taoist robes were lying in ambush. Among them, a young Taoist priest who looked like he had just reached adulthood asked an old Taoist priest next to him in a trembling voice. The thin layer of hair on the young Taoist priest's lips could not help but tremble along with his lips. This young Taoist priest was one of the Taoist priests in the Skyward Palace on Mount Wudang's Tianzhu Peak. The survivors on Mount Wudang's Tianzhu Peak had formed a unique social system of their own over the past 200 years. First of all, because the land around Tianzhu Peak and the mountainside was not much arable land, and the yield was very low, the population had to be maintained at less than 1,000 people. Relying on strict birth control, the population of Tianzhu Peak had not exceeded 800 people in the past 200 years. Secondly, it was necessary to ensure that Tianzhu Peak had its own fighting power. These survivors would select strong males from the babies they gave birth and send them to the Skyward Palace from a young age to be trained by the Taoist priests who knew ancient martial arts. They would be trained in martial arts and sword techniques from a young age. When they reached adulthood, their attainments in martial arts were not to be underestimated. However, because they were completely free from work to practice martial arts, the number of Taoist priests in the Skyward Palace was also strictly controlled to less than 30 people. These Taoist priests were equivalent to the Tianzhu Peak's army. Once the number exceeded 30, the remaining labor force could no longer support this batch of Taoist priests who did not produce. Of course, with just this army of 30 Taoist priests, there was no way they could resist the waves of attacks from Yuan Ku. Their greatest trump card was the Wu-Tang sect leader, who had successfully synchronized with the True Force sword. It was also under the full protection of the Wu-Tang sect leader that Mount Wudang's Tianzhu Peak had lived through 200 years of relative peace. However, this good fortune had ended a few days ago. The powerful Dark Dragon King Zunaida had set his eyes on Mount Wudang. The Wu-Tang sect leader resisted with all his might, but he was defeated and killed in the end. With the death of the Wu-Tang sect leader, there was no longer a sword wielder who could synchronize with the True Force sword in all of Mount Wudang. To be more precise, there was not a single sword wielder on Mount Wudang. There was no way they could resist the Dark Dragon King who had recovered from his injuries and made a comeback. After a discussion among the Taoist priests, they decided to risk their lives and break through the blockade set up by the Dark Dragon King, leading the remaining humans to find a safe shelter. Then, we saw the scene we were witnessing now. More than 20 Daoist priests were hiding in the bushes, waiting for the right time to break through the blockade line. Behind this group of Taoist priests, the remaining 700 survivors all carried their belongings and weapons. Once the Taoist priests broke through the blockade, they would follow behind and kill together. Yuan Kong, put away your cowardice. The old Daoist reprimanded the young Daoist named Yuan Kong mercilessly. We have no other way out. Other than fighting with all our might, there is no other way. Immeasurable Heavenly Lord, immeasurable Heavenly Sovereign, immeasurable Heavenly Sovereign. The rest of the Taoist priests who were lying in ambush chanted in unison. None of them had any fear in their hearts. Behind them were their parents, wives, and children. In order for them to live, these Taoist priests had already disregarded life and death. Immeasurable Heavenly Sovereign, Yuan Kong chanted along. It felt as though he had gained some courage, and his legs were no longer as weak as before. Elder, look. The skeleton mage has left the sentry post. Yuan Kong was still young, so he was the last to notice that the skeleton mage, who had been standing at the sentry post and monitoring the surroundings, had suddenly left the sentry post. He had no idea where it had gone. Yuan Zhen, Yuan Jiyu, you've been waiting here for 2 days. Are you sure that the skeleton mage won't appear in the next half an hour? The elder asked the other 2 Daoist priests. Elder, the 2 of us swear to Emperor Zhenwu that every time the skeleton mage leaves the sentry post, the 2 of us will purposely go to the blockade line to cause trouble. We've killed many skeletons, but the skeleton mage will only return after 30 minutes. The fat and thin Daoist priest said. Immeasurable Heavenly Sovereign. The elder slammed his fist on the ground. This is our best chance. I heard from the sect leader that these skeleton mags need to spend half an hour every day to replenish their energy. This is our best chance. Without the skeleton mage's fireball spell, we'll have a fighting chance. I'll count to 5. Everyone, Follow me and charge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Kill. The elder took the lead and stood up from the bushes. He was the first to charge out. His vigor was fierce, and his courage was majestic. It could be said that he was not afraid of death. Under the lead of this courageous elder, the remaining 20 or so Daoist priests rushed out. They raised the swords in their hands and followed behind the elder, charging out. The skeleton warrior at the entrance became the Wudang elder's first target. The long sword in his hand ruthlessly slashed at the skeleton warrior's shoulder. The skeleton warrior's green soul flame flashed in the skeleton warrior's eye sockets. It raised its iron bone long sword and was about to counterattack. But unexpectedly, a dozen swords slashed at the unlucky skeleton warrior's body at the same time. The green soul flame was instantly extinguished, and the skeleton warrior fell apart into a pile of bones. Following the skeleton warrior's fate, the rest of the skeleton warriors guarding the entrance could not withstand the attacks of the 20 Daoist priests. One by one, their soul flames were extinguished, and they turned into a pile of broken bones. The Wudang Daoist priests did not lose a single person. They had successfully occupied the blockade and the entrance. Their first battle was a success. Everyone, listen to me. There are at least 80 skeletal warriors and 2 or 3 skeletal mags in the campsite. Once you've entered the campsite, split into teams of 7 and form the true martial 7-sectioned formation to clear out all the skeletal warriors in the campsite. Yes. The true martial 7 sections formation was a formation created by the founder of Wudang Mountain, Zhong Sanfeng and Zhong Junbao, according to the tortoise and snake generals of the great Emperor Zhenwu. The true martial 7 sections formation relied on 7 sets of martial arts, each with its own subtleties. It could be used in a one-on-one fight, but it could also be used as a team to kill the enemy. But if 2 people worked together, they could complement each other. They could attack and defend at the same time, and the power would be greatly increased. If 3 people worked together, it would be twice as powerful as 2 people working together. 4 people were equivalent to 8 masters, 5 people were equivalent to 16 masters, and 6 people were equivalent to 32 masters. When 7 people worked together, it would be like 64 masters attacking at the same time. These Daoist priests had been following the instructions of their elders since they were young. The 7 of them practiced swordsmanship at the same time, and they would be taught the martial arts of the true martial 7 sections formation. They had reached the point where their hearts and minds were connected. At the elders' command, the remaining 28 people found their own brothers and sisters. They immediately formed 4 sets of the true martial 7 sections formation and charged into the enemy's camp. Seeing that his disciples had killed their way in, the elder stood at the door and sighed, "Those skeletons far outnumber my disciples and all of their bones are hard. If I don't slash at least 10 to 20 times, it's impossible to kill a single skeleton. Once we're surrounded by the skeletons, I don't know how many of my poor disciples can survive, even with the true martial 7 sections formation." Turbid tears flowed down from the elder's eyes. Fine. I only hope that the disciples' sacrifice can exchange for the safety of our loved ones. The elder wept secretly at the door. He waited for a few minutes, but he did not hear any battle cries from the camp. He was puzzled. He raised his head and saw Yuan Kong rushing back alone. Oh no. The elder slapped his thigh in pain. It seems that Yuan Kong's formation has been broken. Only Yuan Kong, the coward, escaped. When Yuan Kong waved his hand and ran to the elder's side, the elder slapped Yuan Kong across the face. "Vile spawn, you actually had the nerve to abandon your fellow brothers and run back here alone." "Elder." Yuan Kong didn't run back. Yuan Kong covered his face, feeling extremely wronged. "My brothers told me to come back and report that there's not a single skeleton in the camp." "You bastard. Running away is running away. How dare you lie?" The elder was so angry that he wanted to slap Yuan Kong again. Yuan Kong dodged nimbly. "It's true, elder. If you don't believe me, follow me inside and take a look. I've searched the entire camp, and I can't find a single skeleton." Seeing Yuan Kong's wronged expression, the elder believed him a little more. "Yuan Kong, is what you said true?" "It's true, it's absolutely true." Yuan Kong turned around to look, and immediately said joyfully, "Elder, look, aren't the senior brothers all back?" The elder looked into the distance and saw that all his disciples had returned to the entrance of the camp. He opened his eyes and counted. There were exactly 28 of them. That's strange. Where did all the skeletons go? The Wu-Tang elder was puzzled. He looked at his disciples and saw that they were all at a loss and did not know what to do. Forget it. Let's just treat it as a blessing from the Zhenwu Great Emperor. Let's destroy these damned skeletons. The elder waved his hand and made a decision. Disciples, call our families and friends from the back. Let's leave this place and go hide. Yes. The Taoist priests received the order and immediately walked to the back. On the other side, the survivors who were observing the battle also realized that the blockade had been broken through. They all ran out of their hiding places and wanted to meet up with the Taoist priest. Wait. Just at this time, a certain someone shouted loudly, giving everyone a fright. Could it be that a sentient Yuan Shen had appeared? Who is it? The Taoist priests immediately reorganized into 4 sets of the Zhenwu 7-sectioned formation and surrounded the elder in the center. They looked around vigilantly. I helped you get rid of these skeletons. Is this how you treat your benefactor? As soon as the voice fell, Guhan jumped down from a tree. The Yu King followed closely behind and jumped down as well. The elder took a closer look. This man looked extremely ferocious. There were 4 ugly scars on his face. However, from his figure and posture, he should be human. Behind this human was a valiant and extraordinary beautiful woman who held a long sword in her hand. Looking at these 2 people, the elder could not help but recall the 2 figures in his memory, a man and a woman, who had protected Wudang sect together. You are. The elder gestured for the Taoist priests to put away their weapons to show a friendly attitude. I am the military governor, an ancient sword wielder. Guhan smiled and introduced himself. The one beside me is my sword lady, the Yu King Gojianjian. Sword lady? The elder let out a long sigh of relief and immediately relaxed. The heavens have mercy. Wu-Tang Mountain is saved. Chapter 68. 2 benefactors, please accept this old man's bow. After the Wu-Tang elder calmed down a little, he immediately knelt down on one knee and kowtowed to Guhan. 2 benefactors, please accept this bow. Seeing their own elder kneel, the other 28 brothers and sisters knelt down in unison and thanked Guhan and King Yu. You can't. You can't. Guhan hurriedly helped the elder up. Although these people were just NPCs, kneeling for Guhan for 3 days and 3 nights was nothing to Guhan. However, considering that he would need the cooperation of these NPCs in the future, Guhan still pretended to be moved and helped the elder up. No problem. No problem. It's what I should do. The elder stood up and said with a face full of emotion, if it wasn't for the 2 of you suddenly appearing and clearing out this skeleton camp, I'm afraid that my disciples would have suffered heavy casualties. It's nothing. Guhan waved his hand, it's my honor to be able to help you all. Guhan and the elder exchanged a few pleasantries. At this time, the 700+ survivors came out of various places with bags of all sizes and gradually gathered near the camp's entrance. Senior, what are you all doing? Guhan looked at the fleeing crowd and pretended to be surprised as he asked. Of course, he knew that these survivors wanted to leave Wu-Tang Mountain to escape. The strategy guide had already written it clearly. However, the plot required it, so he pretended not to know and asked. Sai, you 2 benefactors may not know, but we are all preparing to leave this place and escape. The elder said dejectedly. Leave this place. When Guhan heard this, he immediately waved his hands and shook his head vigorously. No, no. You must not leave the peak of Wu-Tang Mountain. What a joke. Of course, Guhan could not let these people leave the peak of Wu-Tang Mountain. Otherwise, if they all died when they went down the mountain, his dungeon would fail. Why is that? The elder did not understand. Senior, you might not know this, but there are a total of 17 blockades at the foot of the mountain. Even with my abilities, I had to use all my strength to break through these 17 blockades. However, I'm afraid that my actions have already alerted the enemy. I'm afraid that there are more Yuan Kus gathered at the foot of the mountain than when I ascended the mountain. No matter what, it's impossible for you people to rush over. Guhan made up a story. This was the standard advice in the forum. As long as they said this, the people of Wudong Mountain would give up the idea of going down the mountain. Sure enough, the elder couldn't catch his breath and almost fainted. After regaining consciousness, he stomped his feet forcefully and helplessly ordered his subordinates, "You guys, quickly tell this news to our relatives. Tell them not to go down the mountain to die." Yes. The Taoist priests also looked as if their mothers had died. They went back to persuade their relatives to turn back. Suddenly, the entire mountaintop was filled with the sound of crying. Pessimism and despair shrouded the entire mountaintop. "Two benefactors, it's very windy here. If you don't mind, please follow this old man to Skyward Palace for a cup of tea." The elder forced a smile on his face and extended an invitation to Guhan and King Yu. These two powerhouses who had appeared out of nowhere were the elder's last hope. Of course, Guhan smiled. Everything was going according to plan. Two benefactors, this old man's Taoist name is Refinement. I am the 32nd generation disciple of the Wudong sect. I am currently the acting sect leader of the Wudong sect. The elder, who was the old Taoist priest of Refinement, introduced himself after sitting down with Guhan and King Yu in Skyward Palace. "I am the military governor, an ancient sword wielder of the Yangjing base city. This is my sword lady, the ancient sword lady, King Yu Gojianjian." During the time when the storyline of the dungeon took place, the Yuzhong base city had yet to be built. At that time, only the 3 base cities established by the fleeting calendar existed. In the Huaxia region, there was only one base city, Yangjing. Therefore, all the players in the dungeon claimed that they were from Yangjing base city. In fact, after entering the dungeon, the system would set the players' identities as belonging to Yangjing. Guhan also had a communication device that could connect to Yangjing. Therefore, the identity of the military governor was indeed from Yangjing. Interestingly, some of the strange players would deliberately say that they were from other base cities. To them, it did not matter. After all, the old man of Refinement had spent his entire life on the top of Mount Wudong. How could he know the current situation of the human world? He had to believe whatever you said. However, the strange thing was that after these players completed the dungeon, they found that no matter how perfect the other steps were, they could not get an SSS rating. For some reason, 5 or 6 survivors would die inexplicably. No matter how skilled the players were, no matter how closely they watched, they could not stop them from walking toward death. As time passed, no one dared to make any trouble on this point. Almsgiver military governor, Almsgiver Yu, forgive me for being curious, but why did you suddenly appear on the top of Mount Wudong and risked your lives to break through the 18 blockade lines? My Wutang Mountain has not sent anyone down the mountain for 20 years. In this world, there should not be many people who know of my Wutang lineage. After the old Taoist poured a cup of water for the two of them, he asked the question in his heart. Master of Refinement, you may not know this, but 100 years ago, a disciple of your sect fought side by side with a swordsman from Yangjing. Unfortunately, your disciple died in battle, and the swordsman escaped and reported the news of Mount Wudong to Yangjing and recorded it. Therefore, Yangjing actually knows that there are human survivors and a small number of swordsmen living on the top of Mount Wudong. Guhan answered one by one according to the standard answers on the guide. If the script was correct, then the Master of Refinement was going to test him. Yes, 100 years ago, our sect's Supreme One spiritual master went down the mountain to travel in troubled times to find a future for Wudong. Unfortunately, Senior Supreme One never returned. Who would have thought that he would die in the hands of Yuan Ku, the boundless heavenly lord? The Master of Refinement recited a salute, as if lamenting his senior's misfortune. P.S. A Taoist saying boundless heavenly lord is similar to a monk saying Amitabha and a Christian saying oh my God. The sect master of minute subtlety might have been too busy and remembered wrongly. Why is it that the Daoist name of your sect's disciple in the records of Yangjing City is Enlightened Tai? Ji Yuhan smiled and exposed the probing of minute subtlety. In real history, The story of the Wudang spiritual master Tai'er was true. Records of the Daoist master Tai'er could still be found in Yang Jing's database. However, no player had ever been interested in looking up such information. As a result, when the game had just started and the Wudang Peak Dungeon was released for the first year, countless players had fallen for the problem of the Daoist master Tai'er, which made the Master of Refinement suspicious. Due to the player's ability as a swordsman, the Master of Refinement did not expose the player on the spot. Instead, he nodded in agreement. In secret, he told the disciples to be careful of the player, monitor the player, and not trust the player. This way, the player could not command the disciples of the Wudang Mountain at all. This led to a large number of casualties among the disciples who did not listen to the command, and it was difficult for the mission evaluation to reach above S rank. It was only later that a librarian working in Yang Jing's database coincidentally saw the information of the Wudang sect and solved the game's trap. By the way, this librarian later became an Emperor Sword level swordsman. In Hua Xia, librarians had always been a legend. I was thinking too much. Please don't blame me, sir. Please don't blame me. The old Daoist at the refinement realm blushed. His trick had been seen through, and it was really embarrassing. However, the Master of Refinement was relieved. It seemed that the human in front of him was indeed a swordsman in Yang Jing. Although the Wudang sect had not been in contact with the outside world for 20 years, through some occasional communication, they had a general understanding of the situation in the outside world. They knew that humans had basically lost 98% of the Earth's land, leaving only 3 base cities in human hands. Master of Refinement is doing this for the safety of the entire Wudang sect. I, military governor, can naturally understand these precautions. Originally, we did not want to disturb the peace of your sect, but 3 days ago, I was 100 miles away when I suddenly saw the top of the Wudang mountain in flames, raging sword chi, and flashes of lightning. It was like the end of the world. Thinking that there were still humans in the Wudang mountain, I was worried about the safety of the Wudang mountain. That's why I killed my way here, wanting to see what happened on the Wudang mountain. So, Almsgiver military governor also saw the battle that day. The old Taoist priest in the refinement realm wore a gloomy expression as he said, "To tell you the truth, it was sect leader Ji Jing of our sect who was fighting the Dark Dragon King that day. However, sect leader is already very old, and her chi and blood are all dried up." After forcing the Dark Dragon King back, she spat out a mouthful of blood and passed away yesterday after falling unconscious for 2 days. Master Ji Jing, the celestial Master Ji Jing who coordinated with Lady Zhenwu. Guhan put on a shocked expression. If the records in Yangjing City are not wrong, Celestial Master Ji Jing is already more than 180 years old today. I didn't expect Celestial Master Ji Jing to live until now. We in Yangjing City thought that Celestial Master Ji Jing had passed away long ago. In the history of the swordsman for more than 1,000 years, Celestial Master Ji Jing of the Wudang sect was also a famous existence. It was not because he was famous as a celestial sword-level swordsman, but because he lived for 180 years. Among the swordsmen of the past, Ji Jing's lifespan could be ranked second. If he hadn't died in battle, Celestial Master Ji Jing might have been able to reach the first place on the longevity list. It was also because Celestial Master Ji Jing, a celestial sword-level swordsman, lived long enough that Wudang Mountain could break away from the base city and exist for 200 years. When Celestial Master Ji Jing died, the survivors on the peak of Wudang Mountain suddenly lost their strong protection. That was why they wanted to leave Wudang Mountain and join the embrace of the base city. One had to know that when they first learned of the existence of Wudang Mountain, Yangjing City had once sent a spirit sword-level swordsman to invite Wudang Mountain to join Yangjing City. In the end, he was rejected by Celestial Master Ji Jing. He couldn't bear to leave his ancestral land where he had lived for more than 100 years. Chapter 69. After more than an hour of tea and chatting, Guhan had established a certain level of trust with the old Daoist priest. At the very least, the old Daoist priest firmly believed that Guhan was a sword-bearer from Swallow Capital City and had the ability to rescue the commoners of Mount Wudang from the clutches of the Dark Dragon King, Zunaida. Guhan had also taken the opportunity to understand the entire Mount Wudang's combat strength in detail from the old Daoist priest. Firstly, there were sword bearers. Unfortunately, apart from Guhan, the outsider, there were no other sword bearers in the entire Mount Wudang. In the past 200 years of history, apart from Sect Master Changsho, Heavenly Master Zhijing, who was an immortal sword-bearer, Mount Wudang had produced many other sword-bearers. For example, the Great Second Spiritual Master, who was recorded in Swallow Capital City's information. This sword-bearer was the second strongest sword-bearer that Mount Wudang had produced and had the strength of a famed sword. Apart from that, Mount Wudang had produced 12 treasured sword-bearers and 41 ancient sword-bearers. When Mount Wudang was at its peak, there were more than double digits of sword-bearers at the same time. However, this was all in the past. Ever since the large-scale dimensional rifts had stopped, the difficulty of producing sword-bearers had risen sharply. In the past 20 years, not a single sword-bearer had appeared. Thus, Mount Wudang had fallen to the extent that only Heavenly Master Zhijing was left. Now that Heavenly Master Zhijing had died in the hands of the Dark Dragon King, there were no other sword-bearers in Mount Wudang. Next was the Sword Lady. Although there were no sword-bearers in Mount Wudang, there were many sword ladies. According to the statistics on the forum, there were more than 100 natural sword ladies in Mount Wudang's arsenal. After all, the Wudang sect was a major martial arts sect second only to the Shaolin Monastery. Furthermore, the Wudang sect was an out-and-out sword sect. 9 out of 10 experts in the sect practiced the sword. In the 600 years of history before the apocalypse, there were countless martial arts experts. The treasured swords that they had worn in front of them were all left behind in the arsenal. Before the Great Calamity, the Wudang sect's armory had collected over 1,000 treasured swords with historical origins. Among these 1,000 swords, a tenth of them had awakened the potential of a sword lady. There was the true martial sword passed down by Zhong Sanfeng, the legendary sword of Great Emperor Zhenwu. There was also the silver hook sword used by Zhong Quishan, an ancient sword. In short, as the leader of the martial arts world, the Wutang sect did not lack sword ladies. Previously, the Taoist commandos organized by the Wudang sect were all wielding natural sword ladies that were not synchronized with each other. This was also the reason why these Taoists could hurt Yuan Ku even though they were not sword-bearers. As long as they injected sword essence into the natural sword ladies, even if they could not awaken their human form, they could still hurt Yuan Ku's body hidden in the dimensional gap. These Taoists who were not sword-bearers should not be underestimated. They were all proficient in swordsmanship and had strong sword essence in their bodies. Holding the real bodies of unawakened sword ladies, they could be considered half-sword masters. With the addition of the true martial 7 sections formation, ordinary rat and tiger level Yuan Ku was no match for them. This is all I can do. The most important thing now is to fix my communication device and contact Yangjing City. Guhan drank the tea in his cup. He had just told the Refinement Realm Old Taoist that he could contact Yangjing City and have them send divine sword-level sword-bearers to Mount Wudang to fight against the Dark Dragon King who was about to recover. Therefore, he had to find the components that could fix his communication device. The Refinement Realm Old Taoist immediately racked his brain when he heard that there was a way out. He recalled for a long time before he said with certainty, "It seems that there is a set of broadcasting equipment from before the Great Apocalypse in the Golden Palace on the Tianzhu Peak. Maybe some of the components can still be used." This matched the mission. Ji Yu Han immediately requested, "There's no time to lose. Sect leader Ruwei, please send someone to bring me to the Golden Palace Hall and see if my communication device can be repaired." The old Daoist in the refinement realm didn't dare to be negligent. He immediately called for a short Daoist boy to guide him through the cold. This Daoist boy was none other than Yuan Kong, who was trembling in fear before the attack. In the face of the terrifying Yuan Yang, Yuan Kong trembled violently. However, in the face of the Golden Palace that he played with every day, Yuan Kong was very lively. Along the way, he kept introducing the beautiful scenery around him to Ji Yu Han. He also kept asking Ji Yu Han all kinds of strange questions. "Benefactor Military Governor, are there any survivors in the outside world? Benefactor Military Governor, Are there many sword-bearers in the outside world? Are there many sword-bearers as powerful as Grandmaster Zhijing? Will they come to save us? Benefactor Military Governor, Yuan Kong heard that there's a sea on the other side of the earth. It's made up of a lot of water. Is that sea as big as our Wudang Mountain? Benefactor Military Governor, why can some people become sword-bearers but Yuan Kong can't? Yuan Kong also wants to become a sword-bearer so that he can protect everyone from harm. Guhan patiently answered Yuan Kong's questions. Yuan Kong was no ordinary NPC. Guhan would be very useful in the upcoming battle. The Wudang Mountain Golden Palace was located at the highest point of the Golden Peak. It was also known as the Taiyu Taihe Palace, which meant that the world was at peace. The Taiyu Taihe Palace and the Forbidden City's Celestial Worship Hall were built in the same style. They symbolized the eternal stability of the world. In the medieval era, Emperor Zhu Di of the Ming dynasty built this palace to show that his monarch's authority was bestowed by God and that he had an inviolable supreme status. During the famous era and the later Celestial dynasty, the Taiyu Taihe Palace was a very famous tourist attraction. Unfortunately, following the destruction of the world and the invasion of Yuan Ku, the Golden Palace had been abandoned for a long time. If it were not for the Taoist priests of the Wudang sect stopping them, the Golden Palace might have been torn down by the survivors who lacked firewood to keep themselves warm. However, Yuan Kong was very familiar with the Golden Palace because it was the place where he played since he was young. Under Yuan Kong's guidance, Guhan soon found the dilapidated broadcasting device behind the statue of the great Emperor Zhenwu in the Golden Palace. The shell of the broadcasting device was badly damaged and had accumulated a lot of dust. When he pressed it with his finger, he could leave a mark that was a few centimeters deep. It was obvious that the broadcasting device had not been touched for countless years. What Guhan needed to do was to disassemble the device, find 5 intact parts, and replace them with his own communication device. During the initial stage of the game, countless players were stuck at this stage. They did not know how to repair their communication devices. As a result, they could not progress in the dungeon and could only give up and quit the dungeon. It was only after some technical geeks had cleared the dungeon and released a detailed repair guide that the majority of players managed to repair their communication devices according to the guide. Of course, there were some players who were really stupid and could not repair their communication devices no matter how hard they tried. In the end, they could only give up on the dungeon. Replacing 5 spare parts was a small matter. Of course, it was not a problem for Ji Yuhan. However, there was too much dust when he disassembled the broadcast equipment. It was like a smoke grenade released by a destroyer, and it made him very uncomfortable. Next to the broadcasting equipment, there was a set of electrical tools. With the help of this set of electrical tools, Ji Yuhan easily removed the 5 parts he needed and replaced them with the communication equipment. His movements were so skillful that Yuan Kong was dumbfounded. System notification. Quest 1 completed. You have repaired the communication device. System notification. Main quest has been updated. Task 2. Get in touch. Find a communication band between 57.8 and 120. 5 that belongs to the Yangjin base city. Restore communication with the Yangjin base city and report the situation on the Wutang Mountain to the Yangjin base city. In order to prevent Yuan Ku from eavesdropping on the communication between the base city and the sword-bearers, the communication band of the base city would change once a day. Even in the dungeon, the band would constantly change. Every time a player entered a dungeon, the system would give them a new band for them to adjust their communication. It was said that this setting was to allow the players to quickly familiarize themselves with the use of various devices in the real world through the in-game experience. According to statistics, thousands of sword-bearers had died under Yuan Ku's siege due to poor communication and their inability to repair their communication devices. This was similar to the 90s. Not only did the driving test include Subject 1, Subject 2, and Subject 3, but there was also a car repair test. In that era, it was very normal for a car to break down after a few hundred kilometers. As a driver, if they didn't know some basic repair skills, they basically didn't need to drive anymore. Otherwise, if the car broke down on the side of the road, there would be no tow truck to save them. Back then, Uncle Lei Feng had died when he was repairing a car. Back to the main topic, after Ji Yuhan's constant debugging, he successfully found the communication frequency of Yangjing City on the 87.9 frequency and successfully restored communication with Yangjing City. Hello, this is Yangjing Base City's communication center. Please report your name and level. The communication was very bad, and there was constant static noise. I am an ancient sword-bearer, military governor. I am currently at the peak of Wudong Mountain. There are more than 700 ordinary survivors here. They are facing a massacre by the Dark Dragon King, Yuan Ku. I hope that the base city can immediately send people to save them. What? The Dark Dragon King, Yuan Ku? Comrade military governor, please wait for a moment. I will immediately transfer the call to the Sword Committee office. After a series of beeps, a mature and steady male voice took over the communication. Hello, I am the Sword Committee Office Director. Please explain the information in detail. Therefore, Guhan repeated the situation on Wudong Mountain. After Guhan finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the phone. I am sorry, Comrade Military Governor. The immortal sword-bearers have important matters to attend to. I am afraid they will not be able to reach Wudong Mountain in a short period of time. Please evacuate from Wudong Mountain immediately. We are powerless. Chapter 70. System Notification. Mission 2 completed. You have found the communication band belonging to Yangjing Base City. You have restored communication with Yangjing Base City and reported the situation on Wutang Mountain to Yangjing Base City. System Notification. Main mission updated. Mission 3. Convince Base City. Yangjing Base City is not willing to send out powerhouses to face the Dark Dragon King, as this could lead to huge losses, resulting in the deaths and injuries of deity-level swordbearers. Please think of a way to convince the office director of Yangjing Base City to use his authority to invite deity-level swordbearers to take action within 5 minutes. No one knew how the deity-level swordbearers who entered Wutang Peak managed to convince Yangjing Base City to take action. In any case, the players had come up with all sorts of ways to convince Yangjing Base City. Humanitarianism, humanity helping each other, interdependence, my grandfather being a fleeting old man, all sorts of excuses, but none of them were very effective. Every answer seemed to have a chance of success, but the success rate of every answer was ridiculously low. All of a sudden, posts on the forum about how to persuade Yangjing City to the greatest extent possible were in an uproar. All kinds of masters spoke their minds freely, debating endlessly. Until a master who was said to be a member of the council made a post, instantly putting an end to this debate. Because this counselor only used one sentence to convince Yangjing Base City to immediately invite deity-level swordbearers without hesitation. Director, there is a situation that I must report to the base. Please make a decision after listening to this information, Guhan said through the comms. What information? The director was getting impatient. Why did these sword-bearers always want the honorable deity-level sword-bearers to take action? What kind of nonsense was this? At the peak of Wutang Mountain, there are at least 100 sword maidens. Guhan said calmly. What? What did you say? On the other end of the comms, there was the crisp sound of a cup falling to the ground. Say that again. What did you say? I said that there are at least 100 sword maidens here who have not awakened and are still in deep sleep. Guhan paused for a moment before explaining, this is the peak of Mount Wudong, the ancestral land of the Wudong sect. Before the Great Calamity, the Wudong sect was a leading figure in the martial arts world that was founded on the way of the sword. The other end of the line was silent for a few minutes. Your name is Military Governor, right? Comrade Military Governor, do you dare to use your name as the Sword Lady to guarantee to the people of Yangjing that everything you said is true? I guarantee that every word that I, the Military Governor, have said is true. All right, I'll report the situation to the chairman now. If there are no accidents, reinforcements will arrive in 5 hours. Within these 5 hours, you must ensure the safety of the peak of Mount Wudong, especially those sword ladies. Not a single one can be left behind. Understood. With a snap, the other side hung up the call. He was probably in a hurry to find the chairman. System notification, Mission 3 completed. You have convinced Beijing City to send out reinforcements. System notification, main quest has been updated. Mission 4, preparation. The reinforcements from Yangjing headquarter city will take at least 3 hours to arrive. However, according to reliable intelligence, the Dark Dragon King, Zunaida, has already discovered that 3 of the blockade lines have been destroyed. He will send his forces one after another in an hour to launch an attack on the peak of Mount Wudong. Please prepare your defenses within an hour. With the completion of Mission 3, the first half of the Wudong Summit dungeon was declared complete. The second half of the dungeon, protecting the peak of Mount Wudong, became the most important task. Although the system only said that the Dark Dragon King Zunaida would send out reinforcements, it did not specify in detail how powerful the reinforcements would be. In fact, according to the records in the guideposts on the forums, there would be a total of 10 waves of attack. Under these 10 waves of attack, if no more than 3 NPCs died, the dungeon would receive an SSS rating. If no more than 10 NPCs died, the dungeon would receive an SS rating. 20 would receive an S rating. The number of deaths would be limited to 3. Such conditions were extremely difficult for any ancient sword wielder. However, for a sword master like Guhan, who had unparalleled swordplay, and a famed sword maiden like Qingyu, who shamelessly played around in ancient sword dungeons, it was extremely easy. As long as the two of them blocked all the attacks, it would be fine. However, the rewards of the Wudong's Apex dungeon were about the same as other ancient sword tier dungeons. However, the time it took to complete the Wudong's Apex dungeon was the longest out of all the ancient sword tier dungeons. These 7 hours were more than enough for Guhan to clear another ancient sword dungeon with the same rewards twice. In terms of efficiency, Guhan estimated that he would not be interested in clearing the Wudong Summit dungeon in the future. As such, Guhan decided to properly experience the contents of this dungeon and complete it according to the guide. That way, he would not have any regrets in the future. Within an hour, Guhan needed to make a lot of preparations. Among them, the most important was to create a few sword wielder NPCs on the spot. Yes, you read that right, creating sword wielder NPCs on the spot. In actuality, it was not that there were no NPCs at the peak of Wudong Mountain who had the potential to become a sword wielder. However, due to various reasons, they had not come into contact with a suitable sword maiden. Ever since the first player had accidentally created a sword wielder NPC, there had been players entering this dungeon to experiment with NPC pairings. After spending more than 10 years and testing almost all of the NPCs and sword maidens, they had found a total of 3 NPCs that had been successfully paired with a sword maiden. These 3 NPC sword wielder were of great help to the players. Before this was discovered, the success rate of achieving an SSS rating for the entire Wudong Summit dungeon was only 0.002%. However, with the help of the 3 NPC sword wielder NPCs, the success rate had risen to 0.5%. Among the 3 NPCs, the easiest one to find was the young Taoist priest in the Wudong Temple, Yuan Kong, who had led Guhan to the Golden Temple to find the broadcasting equipment. When Guhan pulled Yuan Kong's hand to the old Taoist priest in the Refinement Realm and said that he could make Yuan Kong a sword wielder, the 2 NPCs widened their eyes in disbelief. In the words of the old Taoist priest in the Refinement Realm, the 28 Taoist priests in the Wudong sect had all tested with a total of more than 1,000 swords, and none of them had succeeded. It was said that there were only about 100 sword maidens in the Wudong Mountain. However, due to the lack of information, the people of the Wudong Mountain did not know that not all swords could awaken a sword maiden. They thought that all the swords in their collection could become sword maidens, so they had tested them one by one. It was also because they had tested them one by one that the old Taoist priest in the Refinement Realm was very sure that there were no sword maidens among his Taoist priests. Compared to the disbelief of the old Taoist priest in the Refinement Realm, Yuan Kong was a little more excited. For some reason, this sword wielder with a scarred face gave Yuan Kong a strong sense of trust. He felt that this sword wielder was an omnipotent powerhouse. If he said that he could become a sword wielder, then he could definitely do it. I can't be wrong. The Yangjing base city has a unique method that can determine which person has successfully synchronized with which sword. I was walking around just now and happened to find Yuan Kong's sword Maiden. Guhan made up a story with a sincere look on his face. Of course, Yangjing did not have such a method to determine if a sword wielder and a sword maiden were compatible. Otherwise, there would be no need for mortals to go to the sword pavilion to conduct a sword inscription ceremony and experiment with one sword maiden after another. Guhan was just taking advantage of the fact that they were all NPCs in the dungeon and would not go to Yangjing to verify the method. That's great. The old Taoist priest in the refinement realm still had some doubts after listening to Guhan's explanation. However, it was never a bad thing to have another sword wielder, not to mention that this was a sword wielder that belonged to the Wutang Mountain. Therefore, under Guhan's guidance, Yuan Kong and the old Taoist priest in the refinement realm walked into a side hall in the Skyward Palace. This side hall was dedicated to the statues of the snake and tortoise generals under Emperor Zhenwu. Among them, the statue of the snake general was carved into a general with the head of a human and the body of a snake. 4 pairs of scaly hands grew out of its back, and each hand held a treasure sword, a copper bell, a jade bottle, a halberd, a flag, a long saber, an iron hammer, a book, and a total of 8 other artifacts. Master of the refinement realm, you said that all the swords have been tested. May I ask, has that sword been tested? Guhan pointed at the sword among the 8 instruments and asked with a smile. Are you talking about the instrument in the snake general's hand? The old Taoist priest in the refinement realm was taken aback. Indeed, no one had ever tried that sword before. No one would have thought that there was another sword in the hands of the statue. But Almsgiver military governor, that sword is a wooden sword. I'm afraid it won't work. According to the knowledge of the refinement realm, a wooden sword could not become a sword maiden. That's not right. Master of the refinement realm, you may not know that among the famous swords, the number 1 sword maiden is a wooden sword. Guhan smiled and patted Yuan Kong's head. Hurry up and take down that wooden sword. Let me see if it's accurate or not. Yes. Yuan Kong did not wait for the old Taoist priest in the refinement realm to agree. He rushed forward and grabbed the hilt of the wooden sword. In an instant, a sword wielder was born. Congratulations, Master of the refinement realm. Guhan cupped his hands at the refinement realm. Chapter 71. When he first saw the frigid aqua sword's sword mistress form, even a serious person like Guhan could not help but laugh out loud. This sword mistress looked very similar to a certain cartoon character from 1,000 years ago, the snake demon from the Calabash Brothers. She was 1.8 meters tall and had extremely long legs that were 1.2 meters long. She had a head of snow-white hair and a body that was as slender as a willow in the wind. Of course, the thing that was most similar to the snake spirit was her slender waist. From afar, it seemed that one could wrap one's arms around her entire waist. After all, the original owner of the frigid aqua sword was a snake demon under the command of Emperor Zhenwu. It was not surprising that she looked like a snake demon after being influenced by her master for a long time. However, Yuan Kong felt very awkward when he first saw his sword mistress. He was a Taoist priest. Why did he have to be paired with such an enchanting sword mistress? Just looking at her made him blush. If they were to stay together for a long time, wouldn't he be in a bad mood? Taoist Yuan Kong, congratulations. Congratulations. Guhan stepped forward to congratulate him. After reaching the top of Wutang Mountain, Guhan was no longer the serious and unsmiling person he used to be. He had become very cheerful and liked to smile. He even went back to congratulate an NPC. Of course, the reason for such a transformation wasn't because Jiyu Han had become more cheerful and adorable. Instead, it was because Jiyu Han had deliberately increased his favorability with the group of NPCs on Mount Wudong. The better their favorability was, the more obedient these NPCs would be, and the less likely they would cause trouble. I wouldn't dare. If it were not for military governor's guidance, Yuan Kong would never have come into contact with Shui Han. Naturally, he would have lived his life in a muddle. You are Yuan Kong's benefactor, and Yuan Kong will never forget it. Yuan Kong was so moved that tears streamed down his cheeks. He insisted on kneeling down and kowtowing to Jiyu Han before he would stop. Seeing that her sword wielder insisted on kneeling to someone else, Shui Han, who had just awakened, felt a surge of vexation in her heart. She opened her small cherry mouth and said in a sharp voice, "Yuan Kong, you useless thing. Since you've become my sword wielder, how can you casually kneel to some random person?" Shui Hanjian was halfway through his words when King Yu suddenly glared at him. Shui Hanjian immediately kept quiet out of fear and swallowed his words back into his stomach. "It's no big deal. It's nothing." Gu Han hurriedly helped Yuan Kong up. "The Dark Dragon King's underlings will attack soon. We still need your strength to deal with this crisis together." "You're right, Military Governor. Yuan Kong will definitely..." "Wait, Military Governor, what did you just say?" "The Dark Dragon King's underlings are going to attack." The Refinement Realm Old Taoist was shocked by Gu Han's words. He quickly grabbed Gu Han's hand and asked, "That's right. I forgot to tell you, Master of Refinement. My brother at the foot of the mountain just sent a message. The Dark Dragon King has already discovered that I've broken through his 18 blockades. He's now mobilizing his troops. I estimate that the first batch of underlings will attack in about 50 minutes. By the way, according to my brother's estimation, these Yuan coups that are preparing to attack are much stronger than the previous Yuan coups at the 18 blockades," Gu Han said casually. Gu Han said it casually, but the Refinement Realm Old Taoist could not remain calm. If every single one of them was stronger than the skeletons, would his Wu-Tang branch still be able to survive? The Refinement Realm Old Taoist looked at Gu Han with a worried expression. Gu Han understood and comforted him. "Don't worry, I've already contacted Yangjing Base City. Reinforcements will arrive in 5 hours. When the time comes, listen to my commands. I promise to protect everyone for the next 5 hours." Gu Han's calm attitude infected the Refinement Realm Old Taoist, as he also calmed down a little. He bowed deeply to Gu Han. "I'll leave everything to you, Military Governor." As mentioned before, there were 3 NPCs at the top of Wu-Tang Mountain who had the potential to become a swordbearer. Among the 3, one was Taoist priest Yuan Kong, who was part of the group of Taoist priests. The other 2 were not part of the group of Taoist priests. They were 2 ordinary survivors. This time, the Refinement Realm was not by Gu Han's side. Instead, he led his group of Taoist priests to do some things that Gu Han had instructed him to do. Time was precious, so the Refinement Realm did not follow Gu Han. Instead, he let Yuan Kong, who had just become a swordbearer, stay by Gu Han's side. At the same time, he also let Gu Han guide Yuan Kong on some swordbearer's general knowledge and combat basics. The area of Wu-Tang Mountain's Tianzhu Peak was quite large. It was about a few hundred acres of land. However, most of the land was made up of rocks, so it was impossible to grow crops. Only some of the leeward land had accumulated a lot of soil and was cultivated into a field. These fields were the only fields for the 700 people at the top of Wu-Tang Mountain. Originally, when Celestial Master Ji Jing was still alive, there was a large piece of land in the middle of Wu-Tang Mountain that was also opened up by the survivors. At that time, the crops produced by the fields were enough to feed 1,000 people, and there was still excess. However, 3 days ago, the battle between the Dark Dragon King and Celestial Master Ji Jing at the belly of the mountain had directly caused the fields there to be burned to ashes by the Dark Dragon King's dragon flames. The remaining fields at the top of the mountain were not enough to feed the 700 people. Even if the Dark Dragon King did not take the initiative to attack and instead sealed off the top of the mountain, the survivors would still starve to death. Because the land at the top of the mountain was precious, the exposed areas had been cultivated into fields. The survivors lived in man-made caves. The survivors who attempted to escape returned to their caves one after another and put down their luggage. However, very soon, they had to carry their luggage again because according to Gu Han's plan, everyone had to be gathered in Skyward Palace and protected together. When the powerhouses from Yangjing City arrived, they would be taken away together. Otherwise, if 1 or 2 of them wandered outside and died in the hands of Yuan Ku, Gu Han's SSS rating would be completely ruined. Gu Han walked on the mountain path with ease. After 2 or 3 turns, he saw a rather beautifully built cave. On both sides of the cave's stone walls, there were 2 lively lions carved. It looked like the home of a nouveau riche. "We're here, it's here. According to my senses, there's a potential sword-bearer inside." Guhan pointed at the cave and said, "Almsgiver military governor, are you talking about here?" Yuan Kong laughed foolishly and shouted into the cave, "Darniu, come out and receive the guess." The Darniu that Yuan Kong was talking about was a strong man in his 30s. According to Yuan Kong, this man was the son of his martial uncle. His ancestor was also a sword-bearer, but his brain was not very good. He was in his 30s, but his IQ was like that of a 7 or 8-year-old child. He liked to play with Yuan Kong the most. A few years ago, his father was ambushed by the Yuan Zhun while protecting the villagers in the mountain and died in the fields. Darniu had no one to take care of him. If he was not as strong as an ox, he would have starved to death at the top of Wudong Mountain. Ji Yuhan told Dianyo about his goal, then pulled Yuan Kong and Shui Han to Dianyo to explain themselves. Darniu clapped his hands and laughed foolishly. In fact, he did not know what Guhan meant. He only looked at the beautiful Shui Han behind Yuan Kong with envy and asked foolishly, "Can Darniu marry such a beautiful wife like little Kong Kong?" If it was not for King Yu suppressing Shui Han with his eyes, she would have slashed Darniu with her sword. According to the guide, Darniu's sword mistress was not in the armory. After all, Darniu's father was Yuan Kong's martial uncle and could be considered a member of the Wudong sect. When Darniu was young, he had touched more than 1,000 swords, but not a single one had succeeded. Darniu's sword was in another family's house. It was different from Darniu's extravagant cave. This family's house was much more desolate. Her cave was located in the darkest part of Wudong Mountain. Even at noon, the inside of the cave was dark. The owner of this house was an old woman with wrinkles all over her face. She did not have any other reaction to Ji Yuhan's visit. She only muttered in a low voice, "Don't rush me, don't rush me. This old woman is still 1 day away from turning 60. Yuan Kong was a little embarrassed and sad as he waved his hand at Guhan. "Grandma is old, her words and actions are muddled. Don't mind her. It's fine." Guhan smiled and brought Yuan Kong, Shui Han, and Darniu to the deepest part of the cave. He pointed at the stone wall and said, "This sword is natural and is inside this stone wall. Shui Han, cut open this stone wall and see. Who do you think you are? What nonsense are you spouting? What right do you have to order me to do this?" King Yu glared at Shui Han, and she immediately softened. She did not know why, but every time she looked at King Yu's eyes, she would feel a deep sense of insignificance and fear. In the end, Shui Han obediently used her sword to cut the stone wall. Gravel continuously fell, and soon, a large hole was dug. "Stop." Guhan signaled Shui Han to stop. After the dust settled, he took a closer look. Within the hole, there was indeed a stone that looked like a sword hilt. It was inserted into the stone wall along with the sword. "There really is a sword in here." Shui Han, who originally thought that Guhan was just spouting nonsense, felt like he had gone blind. Others might not be sure if the stone that looked like a sword hilt was a sword hilt or not, but as a sword mistress, Shui Han knew that it was indeed a sword hilt at first glance. But benefactor military governor, this sword is deeply embedded in the stone wall. How do we pull it out? Yuan Kong asked in confusion. That's easy. Guhan pulled Darniu to the front of the hole and said softly, "Darniu, hold that sword hilt." As a result, another bright light shone out, illuminating the entire dark cave. Chapter 72. The Yu Ling sword was the name of the stone sword hidden in the wall. No one knew which genius player had found the Yu Ling sword in this mountain wall. But in reality, the awakening of the Yu Ling sword was a legendary story. 500 years ago, the third-generation wielder of the True Force sword brought it back to the Wutang Mountain to reminisce. Unfortunately, on the mountain, he bumped into Yuan Ku, one of the 4 heavenly kings of Yuan Ku's organization, Xiongyu the Overlord. At that time, Xiongyu the Overlord was arguing with Yu Ji and was chased out of the house. In a bad mood, He immediately started fighting with the wielder of the true force sword. Xiongyu the Overlord's brute strength was earth-shattering. The true force sword, as the sword of Emperor Zhenwu, was not weak either. The two fought for a day and a night without a clear winner. Both of their stamina and sword essence were exhausted. However, Xiongyu the Overlord had an ultimate move, the Overlord's suicide. After the ability ended, he would lose 9,999% of his energy and vitality in exchange for 1 minute of peak condition. The wielder who had exhausted all his sword essence was no match for Xiongyu the Overlord. This immortal-level wielder who had been accompanying the sword mistress to sweep the grave fell on the Wutang Mountain, becoming the second immortal-level sword wielder to be buried there. A minute later, Xiongyu lay on the ground like a dead man. Within an hour, he would not be able to recover in any way. Anyone who came would be able to finish him off with a single blow. The area around the Wutang Mountain was usually deserted, and very few sword wielder would appear here. Xiongyu the Overlord thought that he would be safe after resting for an hour. However, something like fate happened. A young man who looked like a savage came out with an ancient sword mistress. As a result, the universe-level Yuan Ku the Overlord Xiongyu was killed by a mere ancient sword mistress. This was the only time in history that an ancient sword mistress had killed a universe-level Yuan Ku. The death of the divine sword-tier sword-bearer shocked the entire world. Many sword-bearers rushed to the Wudang Mountain to find out the truth. Only then did they realize that even Xiongyu the Overlord had died. They even brought the little hero who had killed Xiongyu back to the base city. Later, they found out that this little hero was the descendant of a family that was left behind when they retreated from the top of Mount Wudang. His sword Maiden was the Yu Ling sword in Da Nyo's hand. According to his own memory, this Yu Ling sword had rolled to his feet after a mudslide. The players of the future combined the plot of the Wudang Peak dungeon and came to the conclusion after scientific analysis that this little hero was most likely the descendant of Da Nyo. Da Nyo did not have a high IQ, so it was not impossible for him to have stayed behind during the retreat. Sword Maiden Yu Ling's appearance was very similar to Song Hammer's cloud cast iron sword. They were both strong and frighteningly masculine women who were more than 2 meters tall. When she stood next to Da Nyo, who was also very strong, they looked like a perfect match. Yu Ling's personality was a little dull. After she had awakened, she did not say a word. She only stood beside her quietly. When Yuan Kong and Guhan congratulated Da Nyo and Yu Ling, she did not say anything. Seeing that his good friend had also become a sword-bearer, Yuan Kong was even more excited and curious. Who would be the third person to become a sword-bearer? Military governor. Let's quickly find the third sword-bearer. Tell me where it is, and Yuan Kong will lead the way for you, Yuan Kong suggested. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Guhan waved his hand and smiled. The third sword-bearer is far away, but right in front of us. Right in front of us? Yuan Kong narrowed his eyes and scanned the entire cave. Other than himself, Guhan, Da Nyo, and the 3 sword maidens, King Yu, Shui Han, and Yu Ling, there was no one else. Oh, I understand now. Military governor, you must be talking about Uncle Wang who lives next door. I didn't expect him to also become a sword-bearer. Yuan Kong felt a little strange when he mentioned Uncle Wang. This kind of person could actually become a sword-bearer. This old pervert and bachelor was said to have harmed many widows and wives. He was a pest at the peak of Wudang Mountain. No, I'm not talking about the neighbor next door. Guhan waved his hand. That person is in this cave. Don't rush me, don't rush me. This old woman is still 1 day away from 60 years old. In the cave, the withered old woman who was about to shrink into a ball kept repeating this sentence. Military governor, are you sure your method did not make any mistakes? Looking at the cowering old woman who kept repeating don't rush me, the refinement realm old Taoist felt a headache coming on. This inspector benefactor insisted that the old woman could become a sword wielder. He even insisted that he open the armory and find her sword maiden for the old woman. If it weren't for Yuan Kong and Da Nyo's example, he wouldn't have even bothered to find an excuse to dodge the question. The Wu-Tang faction's armory was located in the basement of the Skyward Palace. There were thousands of different kinds of treasured swords inside. These were all famous swords collected by the ancestors of the Wu-Tang faction over the past 800 years. The most eye-catching one was placed in the center of the armory. It was the True Force sword, which was held by the only brand new piece of red silk on the Wu-Tang mountain. It was hard to imagine that this True Force sword, which looked no different from the swords sold at street stalls and used for square dancing, was the sword of the True Force Demon Emperor, a righteous god of the Heavenly Palace and one of the 4 saints of the North Pole. It was an immortal sword with the power to destroy heaven and earth. Oh, by the way, the leader of the 4 saints of the North Pole was the famous Marshal Tian Peng. Be it in real life or in the game, this was the first time Guhan saw an immortal sword maiden. He took a good look at the True Force sword and turned his neck away. To him, immortal swords were still too far away. However, one day, he would hold immortal swords, or even emperor swords, in his hands. Yuan Kong, go to the 7th row on your left and bring me the 5th sword from the top. Guhan ordered Yuan Kong. Yes, military governor. Yuan Kong did not hesitate for even 0.1 seconds after hearing Guhan's words. He immediately rushed over and found the sword Guhan mentioned. The refinement realm old Taoist's face darkened when he saw how obedient Yuan Kong was. This Yuan Kong did it without asking for his permission. Sect leader of refinement, do you know where this sword came from? The refinement realm old Taoist's face darkened when he heard Guhan's question. He used to be an elder in charge of teaching disciples. He only took over the management of the entire Wu-Tang sect after his fellow disciples and celestial master Zhijing died. Before that, the armory had always been managed by other disciples. He did not know anything about the armory at all. The refinement realm old Taoist stammered, unable to explain. This is the Skywalker sword. On the contrary, Yuan Kong quickly answered. Uncle Master told Yuan Kong that this is the Skywalker sword. Uncle Master also told Yuan Kong that there used to be a hero named Yi Tianxing who used this Skywalker sword. Yi Tianxing and the Patriarch, perfected Lord Qingshu Yuanmiao, were good friends. After hero Yi Tianxing died, he gave this sword to the Patriarch and it has been kept here ever since. So that's how it is. Ji Yuhan took the Skywalker sword and placed it in the hands of the old granny, and said gently, "Old granny, please touch this sword." Touch. See. When the doddering old woman saw the Skywalker sword in front of her, she slowly stretched out her hand, wanting to touch it. However, when she was about to touch it, she suddenly retracted her hand. I don't want to die by this sword. I want to go to the valley to look for the old man. Do me a favor and let me go on my own. I'm still 1 day away from 60 years old. The old lady's words were somewhat baffling. She did not know what she was talking about, and her logic was a mess. However, Yuan Kong and Refinement Realm blushed when they heard that. Her words involved the deepest secret of the Wu-Tang Mountain. It was a secret that they were too ashamed to let outsiders know about. I told you to take it, so take it. Refinement Realm grabbed the old lady's hand and pressed it on the Skywalker sword. As expected, just as Guhan said, the sword shone brightly in the next moment. The old lady, who was 1 day away from 60 years old, had her belly bulging again. 5 minutes later, a sword lady dressed in a black gauze dress appeared. Her beauty was even more stunning than King Yu's. As she appeared, the 60-year-old old lady seemed to have aged even more. Chapter 73. System Announcement. Quest 4 completed. 1 hour of preparation time has passed. System Announcement. Main quest updated. Quest 5. The Dark Dragon King's Unidas troops have begun attacking the mountain. The first wave of troops will attack in 20 minutes. Players, please organize your forces to defend. If more than 400 survivors die before Yangjing City's reinforcements arrive, the quest will be declared a failure, and the dungeon will end immediately. On the forum, there were many different ways to defend against Yuan Ku's attack for 4 hours. The trap method involved digging all sorts of traps at the top of Mount Wudong. The 4 symbols method involved arranging 4 teams of true martial 7-sectioned formation at 4 key locations. The door blocking method involved the sword bearers not even staying at the top of the mountain and directly running to the place where Yuan Ku was spawning at the foot of the mountain to block the door. The snake luring method involved using survivors as bait to lure a portion of Yuan Ku to the other side, and then going all out to eliminate the remaining Yuan Ku. In short, there were all sorts of strange methods, and their effects varied. If one was lucky and strong enough, they could get an SSS rating. If one was unlucky and weak enough, it would be difficult to even get a B rating. However, Guhan, who had gathered 3 ancient sword tier NPC swordbearers, did not have to spend so much effort. He gathered all the villagers into the Palace of Heaven and closed the gate. Then, he had the 3 ancient sword tier swordbearers guard the large open space in front of the gate. Everything would be fine. Guhan only needed to deal with the more difficult Yuan Ku boss during the last 2 waves of attacks. It would be enough for him to break through the defense circle and rush into the Palace of Heaven to kill. What Guhan had asked the old Taoist priest to do was to persuade all the survivors to hide in the Palace of Heaven and wait for Yangjing City's reinforcements. The refinement realm old Taoist had completed his mission very well. When the hour was up, almost all the survivors had appeared in Chaotian Palace. The reason why the word almost was used was because there were still 3 survivors who hadn't appeared in Chaotian Palace. No one knew where they were hiding. If Guhan did not find them and bring them to Skyward Palace, according to the previous player's experience, these 3 people would definitely die. For the players who didn't expect to get an SS rating or above, the 3 of them didn't matter. 3 people didn't matter much to a total of 400 players. It wasn't a big deal. If they died, they died. However, for someone like Guhan who was determined to obtain an SSS rank evaluation, this was probably the most troublesome aspect of the entire instance dungeon. The lowest death count for an SSS rating was 3 people, so he had to find these 3 people. There was no other way. At the start of the game, the 5 missing people would randomly appear in 25 locations. Players only needed to search one by one, and sooner or later, they would find the 3 missing survivors. Later on, perhaps because it didn't feel that it was difficult, the shameful system directly expanded the 25 locations to 750 locations. Among them, there were places that sounded very difficult, such as under the cliff, the top of the Golden Peak, and in the bushes. If they were to search one by one, even 10 hours wouldn't be enough. By then, it would be too late. However, the system didn't completely block the player's way. The system would use the NPCs' mouths to provide Guhan with 3 random clues. By analyzing these clues, Guhan could find the location of the 3 missing NPCs and bring them to Skyward Palace. Logically speaking, analyzing the location of the 3 missing survivors was something that was recognized by the players on the forum as having a difficulty of 200 out of 100. In the instance dungeon, it was impossible for players to connect to the forum and search for information about the 750 locations. Players had to be completely familiar with the terrain of Mount Wudang and memorize all the 750 locations in their heads before entering the instance dungeon. Only then would they be able to analyze the answer. It was like having your teacher draw 750 key points in your textbook before an exam and then have you memorize them all. In any case, most players had given up on searching for the 3 people. At the very most, they would just have to spend more effort on other areas. There was still a chance of getting an SS rating. Even for a genius like Guhan, memorizing 750 locations consumed a lot of brain cells. It took him about 4 hours to memorize all 750 locations. System prompt: side quest has been triggered, search for the 3 missing survivors. There is no penalty for failing the quest. After the quest is completed, a random instance dungeon reward will be increased by 1 level. System prompt: player military governor can go to the NPC and ask for clues about the first missing person. Randomly increasing a certain instance dungeon reward by 1 level was something that depended on luck. If one's luck was bad, it would only increase a 1 yuan RMB reward to 2 yuan RMB reward. However, if one's luck exploded and it was used on the capsule machine, the white capsule turned blue, the blue became purple, the purple became gold, the gold became Sorry, so far, no one knew what was on the golden capsule. There was no need to say anything else. This side quest must be completed. Guhan obtained the first clue from the old Taoist priest who was in the refinement realm. Clue 1. Missing survivor Li Dachui was a bald bachelor. The last person who saw him said that he was running near the cloud platform with a red cloth strip in his hand yesterday. With a cursory look at this clue, one would be at a loss as to what to do. A red cloth strip running in the direction of the cloud platform. What the hell could this kind of useless clue be analyzed? However, in less than 10 seconds, Guhan said to King Yu, "Stay here and protect Skyward Palace with Yuan Kong and the others. If there's any news, contact me through the sword mark. I'll be back soon." After saying that, Guhan ran out. 5 minutes later, he returned to Skyward Palace with Wang Dachui, who had a broken thigh. He threw him to the old Taoist priest who was in charge of maintaining order in Skyward Palace. The old Taoist priest was shocked. The old Taoist priest could not wait to ask, "How did you find Li Dachui, military governor?" "My 3 disciples searched for a long time, but to no avail. There's a lack of dye on the top of Mount Wudang, so the cloth is usually grey, white, and black. Red cloth is very rare. On the top of Mount Wudang, there's only one place where red cloth can be found, and that is an acacia tree on the top of Mount Wudang. There's a red scarf tied to the top of the tree. The red scarf on the acacia tree symbolizes love, so I rushed to the acacia tree first and found a comb that Li Dachui had lost on the ground. Li Dachui was a bald man and a bachelor, so why would he need a comb? This comb must be his woman's comb. This means that he stole the red cloth strip while he was running for his life and went to his mistress's house to please her. The houses near the Yuntai are very good, and there are even fewer women. There are only 3 households. I looked around the 3 women's houses, and in the end, I found a half-burnt red scarf in a pile of firewood in one of the households. I looked around the house and found this guy in a pit. His leg was broken by someone. According to him, when he was meeting his mistress yesterday, he was discovered by her man. He broke his leg and threw him into the pit, leaving him to fend for himself. Sure enough, as soon as Li Dachui entered Chaotian Palace, he immediately dragged his broken leg and went to find trouble with his mistress and her man. For a moment, Chaotian Palace was in chaos. "Military governor, you're very meticulous. This old Taoist admires you. Respect." This old Taoist watched Dachui grow up. I didn't expect him to be in the mood to flirt when he was about to run for his life. He deserved to have a broken leg. The old Taoist priest sighed. What's so strange about that? Who knows, he might not be able to survive today. Before he dies, he wants to have some fun. The 2 survivors beside the old Taoist priest laughed and told the truth. "All of you, shut up." He kicked the 2 fellows who didn't know their place. "There are still 2 missing people. I'll have to trouble military governor to find them. The second missing person is called Chen Xiaochue. She lives near the Rising Sun Pavilion. She's a 7-year-old girl. This morning, she told her mother that she was going to watch the sunrise, but there's still no news of her. There are many places on Mount Wudang where you can see the sunrise. Among the 750 locations, there are more than 60 places where you can see the sunrise. Guhan pondered. But with the girl's physique, it's impossible for her to go too far. She should be near the Rising Sun Pavilion, so the number of locations has been reduced from 60 to 20. Out of these 20 locations, 17 of them are too dangerous. It's too dangerous for a 7-year-old girl. Therefore, the remaining 3 locations are the most likely. Guhan quickly ran to the 3 locations he had thought of. However, he couldn't find a single girl. She's not in a safe place. That means the girl must have gone to those dangerous places to watch the sunrise out of curiosity. Maybe she's trapped there. Guhan spent another 10 minutes searching through the 17 dangerous locations. However, he still couldn't find anything. Could my analysis be wrong? Chen Xiaochue isn't near the Rising Sun Pavilion to watch the sunrise? Just as Guhan was about to leave the Rising Sun Pavilion, he suddenly noticed that the soil and rocks around his feet were very wet. A moment of carelessness and he would slip and fall down the cliff. Not good. Could it be that the girl accidentally slipped down the cliff? The moment this thought popped up, Guhan quickly overturned it. If the girl had fallen down, she would undoubtedly die. The system would never allow him to find a dead person. However, what if the girl did not die after falling down? The protagonist falls down the cliff, gets caught by the bushes, and survives. Isn't that a standard plot? With that thought in mind, Guhan walked to the edge of the cliff and looked down. Sure enough, a little girl with tattered clothes was lying on a branch that extended out from the cliff. The rising and falling of her body proved that this lucky NPC was still alive. Chapter 74. Military Governor. The first wave of Yuan coup has arrived. Just as Guhan was about to save the NPC girl, King Yu sent a message through the sword mark. One thing to note was that King Yu called Guhan by his in-game name, and not the despicable person he used to call him. Destroy them. That was all Guhan said. Ha, just a bunch of skeletons. This king can finish them off in 10 seconds. Guhan ended the sword mark connection. In Guhan's plan, because he had 3 ancient sword wielders to help him, he didn't have to worry about defending for the first 3 hours. Besides the last hour, he had to be there. The rest of the time, he could just leave it to King Yu. The most important thing now was to save the NPC girl. Guhan estimated the distance between him and the tree branch. It was around 30 meters. Most mortals or swordsmen would find a rope to tie around their waist and slowly descend from the cliff when faced with such a situation. However, Guhan did not have the time or interest to look for a rope. After thinking for less than 3 seconds, he found the spot directly above the little girl's current position and leaped off the cliff. According to the acceleration formula of gravity in junior high school physics, it was easy to calculate the falling time from a height of 30 meters. T equals the square root 2 hg equals the square root 2 by 30 by 9. 8, which was about 2. 425, 2. 5 seconds wasn't long, but it wasn't short either. Most people could estimate it to be 1.25 seconds if they practiced a little. However, in the situation of free falling from the sky, with the cliff beside him, there were not many people who could calmly estimate that they would last for 1.25 seconds. Fortunately, Guhan was one of them. In an instant, 2.5 seconds later, Guhan raised the poverty sword in his hand and stabbed it into the cliff with all his might. If an ordinary iron sword was plunged into a hard rock while falling at high speed, 10 out of 10 of them would break into 2. However, for the sword lady's main body, the Qingpin sword, it was not worth mentioning. Like cutting tofu, the Qingpin sword easily stabbed into the rock. Under Guhan's gravitational force, it even drew a half-meter-long sword mark before it stopped falling and hung on the cliff with Guhan. Guhan's movements were not small, and it scared Chen Xiaochue, who was crying with her head buried in her hands. She carefully raised her head and saw a godlike hero appear in front of her. He stretched out a hand and said, "Don't cry, Big Brother is here to save you." The little girl with the hammer threw herself into Guhan's arms like a swallow. This little girl was very cute, especially her big eyes, which gave off the feeling of Arale. When she was in Guhan's arms, she got a good look at this great hero and was immediately shocked. This hero's face was so scary, and there were so many worms. "Big Brother, was your face beaten up by those bad guys?" The little girl was young and could not suppress her curiosity. She directly asked about the origin of the scar on Guhan's face. "No." Guhan shook his head. He wanted to say that the scar was caused by himself, but he swallowed the words when they reached his mouth. When you were young, Big Brother didn't listen to Mom and Dad and fell on his own. Just like this time, if you really fell, your parents would be so sad. The branch that supported Chen Xiaochue was quite tough. An adult like Guhan could also withstand it. It just so happened that it could help Guhan return. Guhan gathered his strength and leaped up. He actually jumped more than 20 meters high, but this was not enough to return to the cliff. When he reached the highest point, Guhan stabbed the Qingpin sword into the rock and used the Qingpin sword to jump again, successfully jumping back to the cliff. "Big Brother, do you think that Chen Xiaochue is a bad child? That's why you have to specially come to save him." Chen Xiaochue, who was on Guhan's back, said meekly, "I'm very curious. Why did you come to watch the sunrise today?" "We clearly agreed to leave this place," Guhan asked. "Little Chue knows that we're leaving Mount Wudong, so he wants to see the son of Mount Wudong one last time. Mom said that we can never return to Mount Wudong." Chen Xiaochue's voice was full of melancholy. It was hard to imagine that a 6-year-old child could be so sensitive. When Guhan carried little Chue back to Skyward Palace, the first wave of skeletons had all been reduced to bone dust. According to Yuan Kong, Queen Yu had performed very bravely. His frigid aqua sword had just killed 2 skeletons, and the rest had been smashed by King Yu. Well, this was not strange. After all, King Yu was a famed sword maiden. If these were given to ancient sword maidens, these skeletons probably wouldn't even be able to take one hit from King Yu. However, it was not easy for King Yu to kill all the skeletons in such a short time. This proved that under Guhan's special training, King Yu's sword skills had already reached a basic level. It could be described as not bad. After sending little Chue's sister back to her parents, whose eyes were swollen from crying, the mother blamed herself. She blamed herself for allowing little Chue to watch the sunrise. She never would have thought that little Chue, who had seen the sunrise hundreds of times without any problems, would fall off the cliff this time. After little Chue's parents thanked them profusely, the refinement old Taoist sent them the last clue of the missing person. Actually, this missing person was a little special. It was not that they could not find him, but that the Taoists could not persuade him to come to Skyward Palace. This person was the only senior uncle of the refinement old Taoist. He was old and could not go out to fight, so he was put in charge of guarding Wudong's scripture pavilion. He said that he was old, and there was no point in escaping. He wanted to die with the scripture pavilion that he had guarded for most of his life. Everyone knew that this kind of stubborn old man who did not want to live was the hardest to deal with. In addition, his seniority was higher than the refinement old Taoist, so the people who were in charge of persuading him did not dare to force him. So he became one of the 3 missing people. The Taoists were not easy to deal with, but it did not mean that Guhan, an outsider, was not easy to deal with. Compared to the previous 2 missing people, who needed to spend a lot of time and brains to find, this old stubborn man was easier. When he arrived at the place, he just needed to knock him out and bring him back to Skyward Palace. Mount Wudong's scripture pavilion was located in another col 1,000 meters away from Skyward Palace. It contained all kinds of Taoist classics and secret martial arts manuals from Mount Wudong for the past 600 years. If it was any other time, Ji Yu Han, as an outsider, would definitely not be able to enter the scripture depository pavilion. Surrounding this scripture depository pavilion, there would definitely be many schemes and plots. Just look at the Shaolin Temple's scripture depository pavilion from Old Man Jin Yong's novel. But now, everyone in the Wu-Tang sect, who still counted on Guhan to be the only one in Yangjing City, had no objection to Guhan, an outsider, entering the scripture pavilion. If it were not for Guhan's refusal, they would have sent a few Taoists to lead the way for Guhan. When he opened the old, squeaky door of the scripture pavilion, he heard an old voice saying, "Didn't I tell you little guys that I, an old Taoist, will die in this scripture pavilion even if I die?" Guhan was very disgusted with this kind of stubborn old man. He did not want to live, but he still wanted to drag others to die with him. The key was that he thought his behavior was very noble, and that he was free from vulgar interests. Therefore, he did not intend to be polite and rushed straight into the depths of the scripture pavilion. There, an old Taoist with completely white hair sat on a rattan chair, holding an ancient scripture from an unknown era. The old Taoist was old, but his eyesight was not bad. He could tell at a glance that Guhan was not one of them. "You are not from the Wu-Tang sect." He blew his beard and said sternly, "Get out. This is not a place where outsiders like you can come in. Old thing, I don't have time to waste with you." Guhan walked forward, picked up Ching Pin's sword, and planned to hit the old man's head with the back of the sword. The old Taoist saw that the situation was not good, so he grabbed the book in his hand and threw it at Guhan, then turned around and wanted to escape. Not to mention, this old Taoist's foundation was not bad. With such an old body, he still had the strength to resist. As he ran, he scolded Guhan. "You crazy animal, you actually want to attack an old man like me, an old man in his 70s or 80s. Do you still have any moral heart? Get out of here quickly, and this old man will forgive you, young man. Otherwise, when the disciples of the Wu-Tang sect arrive, you are dead. But it was your disciple who asked me to bring you there." Guhan sighed and caught up with the frightened old Taoist in a few steps. He hit the old Taoist hard on the head. As for whether or not there would be any sequelae like a concussion, Guhan did not care. As long as he did not kill the old Taoist, it would be fine. When the old Taoist fell, his face was full of unwillingness and disbelief. Did the young people nowadays not know the traditional Chinese virtues of respecting the elderly? Guhan picked up the old Taoist with one hand and tucked him under his armpit. Just as he was about to immediately go to the Sutra Pavilion, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. That was because he noticed that the book under his feet, the book that the old Taoist had just thrown at him, looked very familiar. Guhan bent down and picked up the book with his other hand. With just a glance at the cover, he instantly sucked in a breath of cold air. The old Taoist, who was tucked under his armpit, also fell to the ground, and his head hit the floor again. So, what kind of book was this? Chapter 75. In Guhan's heart, there had always been a huge question, and that was, who exactly was his ancestor? According to the 3 sets of peerless sword techniques that had been passed down from his ancestor might really have been an emperor sword-level sword wielder who stood at the peak of swordbearers and led the entire human world. However, if his ancestor was really an emperor sword-level sword wielder, how could he have grown up in the honeycomb building? His parents could not live in the core area and enjoy the safest living environment. Even the descendants of the Ming Yuan Zhendi, who had betrayed humanity in exchange for immortality, had lost all kinds of privileges, but they were still permanently settled in the core area and enjoyed a safe life. Guhan could not understand, so he searched through countless historical materials, but he could not find a Zhendi with the surname Gu. Even if his ancestor had changed his surname, there should be records of a Zhendi with no descendants. However, all the Zhendi had left a clear genealogy of their descendants in the materials. In other words, they all had direct bloodlines, and they had nothing to do with Guhan. In the end, Guhan concluded that either the information passed down by his ancestor was a lie, or there was no such thing as an emperor sword-level sword wielder ancestor, and these 3 secret manuals were all picked up, or that his ancestor had made an even worse mistake than the Ming Yuan Zhendi, and the human world had completely erased all records of his ancestor. The above was all Guhan's own speculation. He had never found any clues about his ancestor, but now, he had found one. The clue was in his hands, the ancient book with the words 9th Heaven Mysterious Sword written on the cover. That's right, the ancient book that Guhan was holding in his hands, which the old Taoist priest had used to hit him, was one of the 3 secret manuals passed down in Guhan's family, 9th Heaven Mysterious Sword. Flipping open this secret manual, he was even more certain of this, because the first page was densely packed with the general outline of the 9 Heavens Mysterious Sword, and it was exactly the same as the 9 Heavens Mysterious Sword passed down by Ji Yuhan's ancestors. The secret manual that I'm so proud of is actually placed in a game's instance dungeon. Any player can see it. Doesn't this mean that the 9 Heavens Mysterious Sword is not my ancestor's unique secret manual? It's a piece of trash that can be found on the street. Thinking of this, Guhan suddenly had a bad feeling. Anyone who found out that something they treasured was casually placed in a dungeon like Jin Ping Mai would feel like their whole life was about to collapse. They would be like an idiot. No. Something's wrong. Guhan immediately realized that something was wrong. If this 9th Heaven Mysterious Sword is really so common that players can read it at will, why can't I find any information about it on the forum? This is impossible. Thinking of this, Guhan's trembling hand flipped to the 2nd page, and then he was stunned. The 2nd page was actually empty. Guhan immediately flipped through the pages at the back of the book until he finished flipping through the entire secret manual. Finally, he was sure that other than the general outline of the 9 Heavens Mysterious Sword written on the 1st page, there were only a few blank pages left in the book. The 9 most important sword techniques of the 9 Heavens Mysterious Sword, as well as the method to circulate qi, were not recorded at all. If it was just a general outline on a piece of paper, then it would be inexplicable to the players and even the sword owner. It was a worthless thing, no different from garbled code. No wonder this instance dungeon had been open for more than 200 years, but no players had ever mentioned the Nine Heavens mysterious sword in the forum. Even if they saw it, they would probably think that it was a useless piece of paper made up by the system to tease the players. They would have no idea that this was actually the general outline of a peerless sword technique. Then a new question arose. Why would his family's ancestral sword technique appear on a page of the general outline, in this Wudang's finest instance dungeon? On the way back to Chaotian Palace with the unconscious old Taoist, after throwing him into the care of the microcosm, when King Yu and the other three sword ladies fought with the invading Yuan Ku outside Chaotian Palace, Guhan did not say a word, as if he had lost his soul. He silently thought about the relationship between the Nine Heavens mysterious sword and this instance dungeon. In the end, after spending a full hour, he came up with a conjecture that Guhan felt was 80% reliable. First of all, when Bat was designing the game instance, it would actively collect all kinds of information from the internet or physical literature. With Bat's supercomputing power, the information it collected was definitely hundreds of thousands of times more than what Guhan collected. So it was not surprising to find information about the Nine Heavens mysterious sword in some corner. In other words, it must have been recorded in some information that in the Wu-Tang sect's Sutra Pavilion at the top of Mount Wudang, there was this Nine Heavens mysterious sword secret manual, and that information also gave the general outline of the Nine Heavens mysterious sword. That information only had the general outline. The Nine Heavens mysterious sword was a martial arts secret manual of the Middle Ages. Before the Great Calamity, Wudang Mountain had been the leading force of the martial arts world for over 600 years. This Nine Heavens mysterious sword should have been stored in the scripture depository by Wudang Mountain sometime during those 600 years. Guhan also learned from the information that in the 200 years after the apocalypse, Wutang Mountain had always been isolated from the world, and the Sutra Pavilion had never been destroyed or stolen. In other words, the information obtained by Bat was spread after the Battle of the Dark Dragon King ended with the survivors of Wutang Mountain heading to Yangjing headquarter city. According to historical records, in reality, during the Battle of the Dark Dragon King, the survivors at the top of Mount Wudang suffered heavy casualties. When the immortal sword-level swordbearers sent by Yangjing headquarter city arrived to fight with the Dark Dragon King and defeated him, there were less than 300 survivors left from the top of Mount Wudang. This clue of the Nine Heavens mysterious sword must have been sent to Yangjing headquarter city along with all the other books in the Sutra Pavilion, and then passed down to the hands of its own ancestors, becoming the Jiyu family's heirloom. Guhan made up his mind. When this mission was over, he would immediately go online to search for information about the Sutra Pavilion on Wutang Mountain, or the news of the 300 survivors. Perhaps they had left behind records or told their descendants about who had obtained the secret manuals in the Sutra Pavilion in the end. When Guhan finally sorted out these things with great difficulty, more than an hour had passed. Guhan, who was in a much better mood, walked out of Skyward Palace to observe the situation of the battle outside. He discovered that the new wave of Yuan Ku had already been wiped out. However, apart from King Yu, who was still excited and full of fighting spirit, the other three sword maidens more or less showed signs of exhaustion. This was especially true for the Skywalker sword. Perhaps it was because its wielder, the old granny, was too old and too slow-witted, so the Skywalker sword could not receive any sword essence from the wielder. She had been relying on the sword essence she had obtained from the old granny when she had awakened. After fighting for so long, there was not much sword essence left in her body. However, the old granny wielding the Skywalker sword was already completely confused. It was impossible to expect her to take the initiative to deliver the sword essence, but the sword maidens could not actively absorb the sword essence from the swordbearer. The only thing they could do now was to let the Skywalker sword withdraw from the battle and conserve the little sword essence left in her body. Therefore, Guhan immediately told the Skywalker sword to withdraw from the battle and conserve the sword essence. The sword maiden, Tian Xing, hesitated for a while and looked at her swordbearer who was curled up on the ground. Guhan was not her swordbearer. Giving orders to her was completely overstepping his authority. It was also a very rude thing to do. Tian Xing could completely ignore Guhan's orders. However, in the end, Tian Xing withdrew from the battle without a word. There was not much sword essence left in her body. Why can Tian Xing withdraw, but we have to fight like idiots? This is not fair. When the sword maiden, Shui Han, saw that Tian Xing had withdrawn, she immediately became indignant. If Yuan Kong had not forcefully pulled her hand, Shui Han would have withdrawn after Tian Xing. I will be in charge of the area where Tian Xing is defending. That should be fine, right? Guhan took out his Qingpin sword. In the entire instance dungeon, it was basically King Yu who was fighting. He was getting a little itchy. What a joke. You're just a human. What abilities do you have? Why did you come here and cause trouble? You think you're so great just because you have a sword maiden? Before Shui Han could finish speaking, a long sword was pressed against her throat. Say that again. What's so great about me? Shui Han's words did not do anything to Guhan, but King Yu was enraged. The conflict was temporarily suppressed. Soon, another wave of Yuan Ku arrived. This time, Yuan Ku had 10 ghostface spiders. King Yu took the lead and rushed forward alone, blocking 2 ghostface spiders. Another ghostface spider rushed into the area that Cold Water and Yu Ling were in charge of defending. These ghostface spiders did not have strong attack power, but they could spit out poisonous webs. Once caught in the web, they would immediately enter a state of paralysis. They would be unable to move and could only let the ghostface spider bite them. Just one ghostface spider was enough to make Cold Water feel very distressed. She was only a grade 9 sword maiden and could only use one basic skill, Cold Strike. The rest of the skills, advanced skills, and ultimate skills could only be unlocked when she reached grade 7, grade 4, or grade 1. Before her sword could even touch the ghostface spider, it spat out an extremely sticky white paste like poisonous web. She was immediately unable to move and was bitten a few times by the ghostface spider. When the effects of the poisonous web disappeared, Shui Han prepared to attack frantically to vent her dissatisfaction. However, another poisonous web was spat out and she was paralyzed for another 5 seconds. When Shui Han exhausted all her strength and consumed more than half of the shield's energy, she finally killed this ghostface spider. She fiercely breathed a sigh of relief and remembered that there were 6 ghostface spiders besieging that pretentious human. With a powerful sword-level personal shield, that human would not die for a while. However, he would definitely be tied up like a mummy, and would be ruthlessly trampled and humiliated by the 6 ghost-faced spiders. He would take this opportunity to make fun of this arrogant sword-bearer. He would tell him to hide in Skyward Palace and not cause trouble for himself. Where are the spiders? Cold Water looked over and saw that the human was leisurely standing in the same place, watching the gradually setting sun. The 6 ghost-faced spiders that had besieged him before had completely disappeared. It must be that famous sword who saved her master. Useless human, always causing trouble for his sword maiden, Cold Water thought with certainty. Chapter 76. After the ghost-face spider was destroyed, the frigid water sword and Yu Ling sword recovered some of their shield energy. Then, the next wave of Yuan Ku charged forward. This time, there were more than 20 desert wolves. They were different from the wolves in the King of Yu Gojian sword instance dungeon. These 20 desert wolves were stronger and could spit out fireballs. They could already be classified as demonic beasts. Moreover, there was a powerful wolf king among the pack of desert wolves that had come to attack. A wolf pack with a wolf king and a wolf pack without a wolf king were 2 completely different concepts. Without the alpha wolf, the pack of wolves would have already rushed up together and attacked randomly without any order to it. However, a wolf pack with a wolf king would attack and defend in an orderly manner. They could even set up formations, such as now. Under the wolf king's command, the 20 desert wolves did not charge forward recklessly. Instead, they lined up in a few formations and faced off against King Yu and the other 2 sword ladies. This wolf king seemed to be judging the abilities of King Yu and the other 2 sword ladies and what tactics to use. Shui Han tightened her grip on the frigid water sword. The wolf king's crimson eyes were filled with killing intent and threat, causing Shui Han's paws to open up. This is a vicious enemy. This is going to be a cruel battle, Shui Han silently thought as she mobilized all the power in her body. She knew that this battle would not be as simple as the previous ones. Awoo! The Wolf King suddenly howled. Shui Han's heart skipped a beat. It seemed that the wolf pack was about to attack. As expected, the moment the Wolf King howled, 8 of the desert wolves under his command split into 2 groups and charged towards Shui Han, Gu Han, King Yu, and Yu Ling. The 2 desert wolves quickly tangled with Shui Han. These wolves were incredibly fast, and their attacks were also quite good. Their teamwork was very exquisite. Although they couldn't break Shui Han's shield for a while, they were still able to restrict Shui Han to a very small area. Shui Han couldn't move to help the others. Why didn't this Wolf King send out all his forces? Shui Han was puzzled. 2 desert wolves were already very strenuous for him. If he were to send all his wild wolves, he would really be done for. Soon, Shui Han's confusion was answered. It wasn't that the remaining wolves didn't participate in the attack, it was just that they didn't need to fight close to Shui Han. The dozen wolves opened their mouths at the same time. Within their mouths, a scarlet fireball was gathering energy. Not good, they're relying on fireballs to attack us. Shui Han immediately understood the wolf pack's plan. He first sent a portion of the wolf pack to separate and entangle each sword maiden, restricting their movements. Then, he ordered the rest of the wolves to use fireballs and focus fire on one of them. This was similar to when players fought a boss. The main tank would tank the boss and pull its aggro. Mags, hunters, and other classes would deal damage from a distance and focus fire on the boss. However, the situation was now reversed. The players had become the boss, and the monsters were killing the boss. By the time Shui Han understood this, the desert wolves had finished preparing their fireballs. They could shoot them at any time. What terrified Shui Han even more was that the mouths of the dozen or so desert wolves were all aimed at his current position. This is bad. Shui Han sucked in a breath of cold air. If a dozen fireballs hit him, even if he didn't die, he would at least lose a layer of skin. He might even use up half of his shield's remaining energy. It's too late. Shui Han despaired as he swept away the 2 desert wolves around him. Then, he threw himself to the ground and buried his face in the ground, trying to avoid the damage from the fireballs as much as possible. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Why haven't the fireballs hit me yet? Puzzled, Shui Han risked raising his head. Then, he was so shocked that he couldn't lower his head anymore. Gu Han, who he viewed as a burden, had charged into the pack of wild wolves that were preparing to shoot their mouths off. Gu Han slashed at the wild wolves' vitals, one after another. Every slash was a perfect explosion of damage. Occasionally, there would be 1 or 2 sure kill damage. In Shui Han's eyes, Ji Han was like a surfer swimming on the sea. He swam freely among the wolves without any hindrance. Every time he swam, a wild wolf would die. Even the angry Wolf King, facing Ji Han, only took a few more strikes than the ordinary wild wolves in the desert. Then, it became a corpse and was sucked back to the 2D world by the dimensional vortex. The whole process was as smooth as a musical and could not be stopped. Compared to the wild wolves in the King of Yu Gojian Sword Instance dungeon, the current Gu Han was far superior in terms of damage, fluidity, and strangeness of his swordsmanship. This wasn't strange. At that time, Gu Han relied on a mortal's physique to fight. But now, Gu Han had half of King of Yu's physique. The effect of fighting was naturally different. After killing all the wild wolves, Gu Han also killed the 2 desert wolves beside Shui Han. He patted Shui Han's shoulder and praised, "Not bad. You know that lying down is the best choice. The next wave of attacks will take about 10 minutes. You can take a good rest and try to recover all the energy in your shield." Cold Water Sword didn't know what expression to show. A human that he had looked down on just moments ago was now displaying such power. He even patted his shoulder and praised him. Should he find a cliff and jump off? Just as Shui Han was feeling ashamed, there was a commotion in the originally quiet Skyward Palace. Then, there was the sound of smashing things and cursing. It seemed like something huge had happened inside. Could it be that Spectre Nepoti is here? Guhan's expression darkened. After instructing King of Yu and the others not to leave their positions, he quickly ran back into Skyward Palace. Among the primordial spectres that attacked Skyward Palace, there was a wave of ghost primordial spectres. They were silent and invisible. Without the help of the sword ladies of the demonic path, it was almost impossible to detect the traces of these spectres. These spectres couldn't attack anyone directly. They didn't have any attack abilities, but they could possess the bodies of mortal NPCs and control them to hurt the people around them. This was a wave of attacks that was very difficult to defend against. No matter how good the defense outside was, the survivors in Skyward Palace couldn't deal with the people around them. A lot of players fell at this stage. It wasn't easy to clear out the spectres, but the number of survivors who died was more than 10 to 20. After discovering the huge commotion in Skyward Palace, Guhan thought that the wave of spectres had appeared ahead of time. If that was the case, there should have been deaths in Skyward Palace by now. Guhan's SSS-rated target was basically out of the question. Fortunately, when Guhan entered Skyward Palace, there were no casualties. There was only an old man who was constantly smashing various items in Skyward Palace. A group of Taoist priests followed behind him and tried to persuade him, but none of them dared to stop him. The person who could make the Taoist priests hesitate was none other than the old Taoist priest who was a generation higher than the refinement realm, who had been knocked out by Guhan with the back of his sword. The other Taoist priests were his disciples and grand disciples. None of them dared to stop him. They could only let him vent his anger in Skyward Palace. "You bunch of trash, I raised you up for nothing. You actually let an outsider knock out your martial granduncle in the Sutra Pavilion. You're useless. Hurry up and catch that person. I'm going to teach him a lesson." People nowadays don't even remember the basic respect for the old and love the young. The old man was throwing a tantrum in Skyward Palace. He scolded his disciples and grand disciples in a loud voice. These disciples and grand disciples all lowered their heads and didn't speak, allowing the old man to insult them. Old man who takes advantage of his seniority. Seeing this scene, Guhan regretted going easy on him. It would have been better if he had beaten him into a vegetative state. That way, he wouldn't have to make a fuss here. When the old man heard Guhan's voice, he turned his head and saw that his enemy had already appeared in front of him. He was instantly furious. He pointed at the young Taoist priests behind him and ordered, "You guys, catch that brat of yours." The young Taoist priests looked at the old Taoist priest and then at Guhan. They suddenly felt that they were in a dilemma. Logically speaking, since the martial granduncle had given the order, they should resolutely carry it out. However, the person in front of them was not an ordinary person. He was a sword-bearer sent by Yangjing Base City. More than 700 people in Skyward Palace were all counting on Guhan to survive. Now that they had angered Guhan, he would send their reinforcements back with just one word. What should they do? Moreover, they had clearly seen the situation outside just now. If it wasn't for Guhan's Lord Yu in front of them, the three sword ladies on their side would definitely not be able to hold on for long and would definitely be defeated. By then, it would be difficult for them to escape death. Therefore, this Guhan must not be angered. Therefore, this group of young Taoist priests very wisely chose to be cowards. Refinement was the only person qualified to comfort the old Taoist priest. He patted the old Taoist priest's back and kept saying something. "Calm down, don't lower yourself to the level of a child. He's also doing it for your own good. He wants to protect your safety and things like that in an attempt to appease the old Taoist priest's anger." The old Taoist priest's actions made Guhan feel a lot of anger in his heart. He was just a lousy NPC, what was he trying to do to him? However, at this time, the situation seemed to have calmed down. Guhan decided to let it go. He walked in front of Refinement and said, "Look after everyone here. If there's a fight, we'll all die together." After saying this, Guhan turned around and left. He did not want to stay in this crowded Skyward Palace anymore. However, unexpectedly, the old Taoist priest was still upset. Seeing that Guhan had no intention of apologizing to him, he casually scolded, little bastard who was born and raised by a mother. Well, he instantly exploded. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.